All right, being 7:01, I call the Lisle Library District Special Board meeting for April 7th, 2021 to order. The Lisle Library District recognizes Governor Pritzker's Executive Order number 22. Having trouble with numbers tonight. Number 2021-06, which extends Executive Order 2020-07 as amended by Executive Order 2020-33 and Executive Order 2020-44, the January 8, 2021 disaster proclamation, and the Government Emergency Administrative Act number 100-06-40, which suspends certain requirements of the Open Meetings Act, allowing library trustees to participate remotely. All motions will require a roll call vote. Have a roll call, please.
Marjorie Bartelli.
Here.
Thomas Duffy.
Here.
Thomas Hummel.
Here.
Karen Larson, absent. Jenny Norton.
Here.
Liz Sullivan.
Here.
Emily Swistek.
Here.
All right, next item on the agenda is for opportunities for visitors to speak. Did we get any emails to the board did receive one from a constituent, and I'll just, there's some other things that will be summarized in the minutes, but basic thing was she didn't want us to issue any debt. And there's other things too, which will be summarized in the minutes.
Can you read the whole email?
I'll just summarize it. This is just a summary. That's how we do for emails. Next, if there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak.
Yeah. Just from here?
In 5 minutes.
Oh, we'll take that one. Hi, my name is Susan Cass on 1930 Morton Road in Lisle. I think I have 3 points to make. First of all, this project I know has been on the drawing board for probably a good long time, as most projects of this magnitude are. But I find myself thinking that it is a project whose time may have come and gone. First, relative to library visits, relative to the decline in the number of card holders, and sort of just the general utility that most people hold the library in. Now, I happen to think that our library is highly functional as is. I'm a library card holder, and I think it's a very important and valuable community service. But there are limitations. So that's my first thought, that this project may be outsized vis-a-vis where the usage and where the need really is. Secondly, I think the numbers that are being considered are ginormous relative to what's being included in the project. I know moving walls and things like that cost a lot of money, but these are ginormous number for no increase in square footage, only a reallocation of space and some new features like a drive-up window, which I think COVID made much more appealing, so I get that. So I think it's a very, very aggressive dollar amount for a relatively short list of key improvements to the library. I would certainly personally prefer that the library board consider a spending program to do all of the deferred maintenance, improve technology, all the health and welfare things that might need to be done. And I haven't had a chance to look at the entire list, although I did spend some time on it. So I can certainly see value in that. Deferred maintenance is not something that anybody wants to be going on in their building. So I think that there is a reasonable project cost here that can fix some problems, and perhaps 2 of the 3 of the key features could be included, but I really don't think that even the lowest dollar we're talking about, 7.7 million, is sensible vis-a-vis the value that I perceive as being given here, the top 5 or 6 items. Thirdly, and probably most importantly, I think spending the public's money, whether it's been amassed over time or whether it includes, which this does, new tax dollars ought to be put to referendum, period. So that is, I don't think there is any appetite in most of the Lisle community for higher taxes. We are taxed extraordinarily high for a village of our size. And I think the taxpayers deserve to speak. And to the extent that the project is viewed as the best use of funds for the board and for our community, hooray. But I think the voters deserve a chance to make their opinions known. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I just asked any of the speakers to keep the mask down.
I mean, we're over 6 feet away.
That's, but this, if you keep it on though.
All right, but I heard Marjorie. I want to make sure. Marjorie, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, beautiful, thanks. Okay, I'm Ray Soika. I live at Cedar Court in Lisle. I've been here before. I'm not going to be redundant with respect to the referendum. First of all, I want to say thank you to those board members at the last meeting I was here who started asking questions, asking good questions about the scope of this, about the scope of the project, payment of the project, the fact that it's going to be raising taxes and so forth. I applaud that. And those board members who did that, I want to thank you again. You are operating as people who hired you, us voters, ask you to do, to watch over us. Okay. But I'd like to move on from that and say, what's the hurry? And I've been in these kind of meetings in the public sector. People are looking to get paid. The consultant is looking to get paid because the bigger the project is, the more money they make. The financier is looking to get paid because if there's no debt, then he doesn't get paid. If you spend just with your reserves, which we know you have plenty of because of all the years of overtaxation lawsuits you had to pay off, okay, then he doesn't get paid. And then Tatiana, of course, Tatiana wants a spanking new library with all the bells and whistles.
Please just address the board.
I'm going to address who I want. I'm a taxpayer. My taxes go here, and Tom, you're out of line. So let me finish. Okay. So Tatiana wants a new library, so she's pressuring you too. So I see a three-headed monster coming in trying to pressure this board. And I'm saying, what's the rush? What is the rush? There's no need. Two of you, one of you is definitely leaving this board. You're so committed. You're leaving after half your term left, moving on to another office. Another Tom Duffy, maybe, depending upon what the mail-in vote said. The election there is close. So two of you have already, kind of are one's all the way out the door. The other's halfway. You shouldn't be voting on this at all. Let the new board decide. So, and I agree with what Ms. Cass has said and others have said. Let's look at what basically needs to be done. Maintenance. Karen, I'm seeing a lot like what happened at 202. Oh, let's defer to maintenance. Oh, let's build a whole new building. And that building, they have less students in pre-K through 5 now than they did when they started the building at 202. Same thing. Let's defer all the maintenance. Oh, but let's build a big project. Take care of all the maintenance things first. But also, how many other library districts have registration records, library registration records on a file card? I talked about this before, just for a point of emphasis. Go to Naperville. Do you think their registration library board card registrations are on a 3x5 index card? I'll take you and show you mine if you want me to. But take care of that. Take care of the maintenance. Take care of the technology upgrades. Take care of getting us more access to more things electronically. Give the people better tools. Have the electronic checkouts like Naperville has. That we can make our staff more productive. And so these are just a few of the things. No rush. Let the new board decide. Don't take any debt because as the PMI, as the financer showed last year, it will be a tax increase forever. And his assumptions on that model, 5 million in new construction every year. Lisle is a landlocked community. Those assumptions are very rosy, which may mean you may have to take on additional debt, which means more tax increases. I saw him, he basically laughed off the fact that you did a good job the last few years reducing taxes. No, but now it's time to take those reductions back and raise taxes. So all the good work you did in kind of eliminating the overtaxation, you'd be taking back with raising taxes on the people here in the community. So, and again, I'll say it again, wasn't planning on, if it's such a great idea, put it to a referendum. Thank you. All right, and one last comment is, I think even the building, but let's let Tatiana focus on the things that matter in her job. Let's turn around the number of library card holders. Let's increase the traffic in the library. Those are things that the director should be doing. A rebuild would just be, a rehab would be just another distraction. So keep our money with us and don't feel pressured by the consultant, the finance people, or our library director to make a decision tonight. Thank you.
All right. I just want to clarify there's been no votes taken, and the director is not pressuring us, as well as she's been very fiscally responsible for the last, since she's been director, and I don't want to speak for her, but I can tell you she does not want a new library building. Okay, next item on the agenda is concept design and financial analysis discussion. Want to be over to Mark or Director Weinstein?
Yeah, Mark can take it on.
No problem. So good evening, everyone. What I'm going to do today, I think to make it simple for everyone to follow along, is walk through the CCS supplement document so that we can go through each one. I can start to explain some of the information in there. And then at the end of that, and if there's any real burning questions in your mind, feel free to raise a hand or something, and I'll try to answer those questions in the spot. But if you have larger discussions, we can hopefully kick that into at the end of the walkthrough. So I'm going to share my screen just to make it easy for everyone to see what I'm referring to.
Would that be shared up here?
Yes. So bear with me. There we go.
To see, but all the information is in the packet as well.
Right. This is the exact information in the packet downloaded from the website, so everyone knows. And let me get it bigger for you. All right. Hopefully everyone can see it. Like I said, it is the information in the board packet. Nothing new. It's directly from the website. I'll start with the financial analysis. It's just to give a very brief update on this. We can go into more detail when I get to the supplement. But based on feedback after the last board meeting, PMA was tasked with looking at what a 2020 tax levy extension as a baseline would do as compared to using a 2018 tax levy baseline. So when they did that analysis, originally, if you recall back the last board meeting, it was discussed around an $8 million project cost. Using the 2020 tax levy extension, it is keeping a healthy fund balance, or what was it, we at least perceived the board to feel was a healthy fund balance, resulted in about a $7.7 million project cost. There still is an $8 million project cost using 2020 tax levies, but the general discussion between staff and PMA was that the fund balances might get to a level where the board might not be comfortable. So we'll show those, we'll go through those, but wanted to at least put that out there. So what we tasked the rest of the project team, being the architect as well as CCS, with doing after PMA ran that information was, what is a $7.7 million project cost? What has to happen for it to go from 8 to 7.7? And looking at it, and there's multiple options, but one of the simple options, if you recall the plans from last month, is that they had new entry vestibules that stuck outside, so it was in addition to the building for the new entry vestibules. Those vestibules were roughly a 670 square foot addition in total. Because of, and we'll give you some examples from other projects, not just this and not just what CCS has seen historically, but taking those vestibules, we'll still have them, but maybe putting them inside the constraints of the existing walls of the building. So in other words, instead of expanding by 650, 670 feet, we'll put it as part of the existing building. You'd be able to, we think, save somewhere in the range of that $300,000 amount. So that's the main difference between 7.7 and 8. It's whether the new vestibules on the south and the north side are additional space or contained within the existing building square footage. And that's where you can see it here. I'm going to go line by line on this. Order of magnitude project cost. The project cost includes all of your furniture, all of your fittings and fixtures, all of your equipment. That would be RFID, IT, cabling, all of the technology that needs to be updated, as well as the construction costs and the consultant costs. Consultant not being the full design team, as well as any material testings you might have and things of that nature. We'll go through that later today, but I wanted to call out what the difference between project cost is and construction cost. And typically on every library project, you'll see a 20 to 30%, sometimes even 35% upcharge from construction costs to project cost. And that is again to cover all the consultants, all of the furniture, all the equipment, all the IT, everything in there. The construction cost is what it takes for a contractor, general contractor, construction manager to come in and build the building. So going line by line, I kind of explained this total building size, the difference between 7.7 and 8, being 32.8 in the first column that's highlighted and 33.4 in the next column. In reference to the larger west main entry concept, the 13.8 project cost, we were trying to give a high end. We wanted to give you a range of what could be foreseen. I do think there are opportunities to bring that cost down, but in essence, you're building a lot of new exterior walls, a lot of new space. So that's why that cost is so high, and you're still only at the 32.8 number for building size. So you can start to see the differences. Now, what do you get in terms of bang for your buck between 7.7 and 8 and 13.8? What are the differences in terms of the designs that we're looking at today? So that's what this key inclusions is for. Number one, the library board has tasked the team with saying, we'd like to see what options there are for putting the entry on Front Street for a number of reasons. One being that when people come in to try to find the library, the address is Front Street. They're looking for it. They come in on Front Street and they realize they can't even get to the main entrance from Front Street right now. The next thing is the right-sized youth department. That's a very big one. I know that was part of this strategic plan. Right now, your youth department is too small for providing the services that the library would like to provide. What the renovation does, as well as all the other options, is a right-size the youth department by growing that space. And that's done by rearranging where things are to make it more efficient for the library to put the youth department the right size. And you get that right size in all three options. Family restrooms, you would get family restrooms in all three options. Teen collection space, you would have that in all three options. Drive-up window space, you would get that in all three options. Stormwater issues being addressed, these are the ones that were called out in the facility condition report. Those are all addressed in these options. Additional study rooms, which is called out as a key for the library. They're all, you're gaining additional study rooms in all of these options. Outdoor program space is another piece that you would gain in all of these options. We talked about it, this is a carryover chart from last time. It hasn't been determined where an outdoor space would be put in a renovation project, but it was discussed publicly at the last meeting that a good spot might be where your current east entry is. So you capitalize on the sunk cost into that. It exists as it is right now. Let's try to use the money that's invested in it when you built the canopy to utilize it as an outdoor program space. The other thing that's important to note is that the facility condition assessment items are all covered through the 10-year cutoff. The reason why it's 10 years, not 20 years, is things that are still good for 10 years. You don't want to throw away the money on those 10 years and have to start over again. So something's typically like a roof, lasts from 20 to 30 years. Why replace it at 15 years if you know you're going to get another 5 to 10 years out of it? It's just throwing money away because you're going to start that cycle over again and have to do it again in 20, 30 years. It's just sooner and sooner. So looking from the architect's perspective, this is their their advisement, as well as as well as a facility condition assessment that looked at putting those items such as a roof maybe up 10 years plus. So you can start to see when you look at what the board suggested was key inclusions, the project parameters, you're getting everything that you had asked for in all three of these options. And I think that's key to understand, and that there's no need to go potentially to 13.8 million to get the options that you're looking for. You get those in the renovation options. It's really a pragmatic way to go about looking at this. The other thing I would like to just call out now, and I'll reiterate this as we go through, is the cost we're looking at here is not how much you're going to pay for the project. Quite simply, this is a budget. What you bring on an owner's rep to do is to help develop a budget. And similar to when your library is developing a budget for the fiscal year, you want to meet and make sure that you can afford to pay for what you're setting out to do. We would not want to set up a situation where you cut everything back so far just because you thought you can get it for a little bit cheaper or whatever else, to the point where when you go out to bid and real world hits and real numbers hit, that now all of a sudden, instead of, you decided not to carry 5.4 million for construction costs, you said, we think we can get it for 5. Well, you can't. We've done this, over and over and over, and historically, we know what those numbers are roughly going to come in. We want to make sure you're covered safely to handle this project cost. So this is not what you're going to pay for the project. This is the information you need to develop a project budget. The last thing I wanted to do, there were some questions at the last board meeting on the sticker shock, right? Everyone's used to maybe hiring a plumber to come fix something at their house, or put a new roof on their house or something like that. Why does it cost so much to do commercial construction? I wanted to pull historical data from not only CCS projects, but projects that we haven't been involved in, the architect hasn't been involved in, to give a sense of what's going on the market, no matter who's in your project. Because realistically, the costs are not being driven by your designer. Your costs are not being driven by that team. The costs are being driven by what is in the documents, right? Because if designer A comes up with a wall, it has to be to code. It's going to be drywall on both sides, metal stud, whatever else is in there. Designer B is going to come up with that same wall. That wall, whether it's designer A wall or designer B wall, is going to have the same cost when a contractor comes and gives you a bid for it. So I wanted to kind of walk through what we're seeing on things that maybe this team hasn't worked on. I'll start out by looking at Villa Park Public Library. That is something that CCS was actually the owner's rep on. The designer was a different designer, but it was it was a way to start looking at it, because I know the ins and outs of that project. I know what was included, and I know what wasn't included, and I can explain that. So Villa Park, just over a year ago, completed a 24,500 square foot renovation of their existing building. And it's a 2-story building. Basically, they took off an entire exterior wall on one side of the square-ish building and put a 6,800 square foot addition on one side of it. That project cost was 10.6 million. The construction cost was 7.85 million. And that's, again, the difference is project cost is everything that it costs for you to build the project. The construction cost is what it costs for you to have a general contractor come in. The general contractor is not going to be purchasing your furniture, your chairs, your server rack maybe, your RFID, your security systems. That's not going to be in there. So that's what there's delta there for. And you can kind of see that ties to it. You're looking right now at a 32,800 square foot building. It's the Lisle Library building. It's a little bit more square footage in the renovation, but you're not putting an addition on there. And that's the addition that's driving up that cost to the 10.6 level. I wanted to look for an example of why I think that there's a 300K delta between the 7.7 million option and the $8 million option, based on that 650 or 670 square foot vestibule addition, like I was talking about. These are real numbers, actually. So the Poplar Creek Public Library, it's a branch library, put on a 600 square foot single story meeting room addition. There was a little bit of site work to put in a meeting room around an existing building. It was a pure addition, but the construction costs, it's not project costs, so just the contractor, their actual bids came in at a range from $459,000 to $667,000 within the last year. So when we say, okay, we think we can save about $300,000, you're not going to save $450, because a meeting room has a little bit more going on than a vestibule, right? And also a vestibule isn't, you're still having site work on your building anyways to handle stormwater issues and parking issues. So some of that number is site work, but you can start to see that that's why we're dragging some of the numbers out. They kind of line up, and it was a fact check really of what CCS, our cost team, was looking at, and aligned very well. Another example, and it's, sorry, by the way, Poplar Creek, neither CCS nor Sheehan Nickel Hartrace worked on, so it's not one of ours. Same thing with Joliet Public Library, the Ottawa branch, it's not one of our projects. Public information that I was able to find is that they are doing a 75,000 square foot interior renovation. So you're a little bit less than half of that. And their construction cost is 10.5. And it's just an interior renovation. It's not doing anything site work or anything like that. You can look at your project cost that we're looking at from the 7.7 million option, just 32,800 square foot addition, or sorry, not addition, a renovation. That's 5.4 million, including site work. It's about half, which seems to make sense when you factor in that you're doing site work, you're replacing exterior windows, so it's part of your facility condition assessment and things of that nature. The last one I'll bring up that I was able to find publicly was the Prospect Heights Public Library District. They're working on a 24,000 square foot renovation project. So a bit smaller, and that again is an interior renovation project. The project budget there is 5.5 million. It's smaller and it's interior only. I don't know exactly what they're doing in that project, right? Because we're not on that. But you can tell right off the bat that if you're going to add in another 30% or so on top of that, I think I might be doing the math wrong a little bit. You can start to see why that 5.5 goes up to about $7 million project. We'll have 7.7 million once you add in site work that you need to do to handle the stormwater issues, your parking issues, as well as your entry. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context that it's not just numbers that Lisle's looking at. These are numbers that the commercial market is dictating. It's caused because you have requirements for supervision, you have requirements for so that things are done right by the right people, and there's a safety overlook. It's caused because prevailing wage requirements require you that you can't go and hire someone just randomly off the street to do work. There's a serious construction project cost in there. I'll stop there before I move on too much, just to see if there's any board questions at this point. I don't see you yet, so I'm going to pull that back up. And if you have any questions right now, otherwise I'll keep going and we can circle back on this too. All right.
Question.
So I'll keep going on. Concept, design, alignment to project parameters. So this is, let's see if I can zoom in here for those in attendance. A little better. We took a look to say, okay, what are you getting out of the $7.7 million project that you wouldn't get if you just did the facility condition assessment? This FCA, that stands for facility condition assessment items. That's your maintenance coming up, and with adding a restroom on the second floor. And the restroom on the second floor added is because you don't have one there now, and it's routinely been a problem for the youth department not to have a restroom, public restroom. Children wetting themselves up there because they can't get down to the bathroom is something I heard the board say a number of times in past meetings. So number one, a main entry on Front Street. It does not happen with facility condition assessment. You can't do that. You do get that with the renovation. The youth department on the same level as the main entry. You do get that with the renovation. You do not get it with the facility condition assessment. The reason why that was listed here is because of the comments that were made by the board in terms of getting strollers and families. Libraries, especially libraries today in the 21st century, are heavily utilized, and really viewership is driven by youth, right? Getting families in here to see programs, because there's a ton of programs, and a lot of library districts, we're lucky to have a library district have as many programs as you've had pre-COVID, and hopefully coming back shortly once everyone's vaccinated here. To get people in the door, you need to be able to get them comfortably in. That was one of the things that you guys listed as a want. Next one is the right-sized youth department. With the renovation project and the realigning of taking youth off the second floor, putting it on the first floor at the main entry, you have a 60% size increase in the youth department. That is a huge amount of space there that you could use for programming, the teen collection space, for the general usage of the main usage of the library at times. You don't get that with the facility condition assessment, what you do get is a decreased size for the youth because you have to take space away from the department to add a restroom in. Next one, in terms of space allocations aligned to the 21st century library. That's the 21st century library is really driving on what is the future of libraries. That is something your design team has talked to you guys about over the past few months. I won't belabor that one, but it's trying to make sure your spaces, when they did their programming, what is the future use of the library? And the spaces today, you have too large of certain areas and too small other areas. Align it to the future use of the library. That's what this does. The other thing is with the north main entry renovation, you would get 2 family restrooms at the new main entry. With the facility condition assessment items, you would get that, we're saying we're adding the restroom on the 2nd floor, you would get 1 on the 2nd floor. It wouldn't be at the main entry, but it would be there, so wanted to be fair to that one. Additional study rooms you had asked for, there's 4 in the current plan right now. There's no additional study rooms, and just basically taking care of renovation or taking care of your maintenance items. Teen space, you have a teen space in the renovation plan. There's no teen space if you were to renovate, take care of maintenance problems. Welcoming entry, new entry awnings. It was in the strategic plan that you wanted to foster a welcoming environment. And I think part of this is really when you walk in, you have access to staff and you see someone, and you go to libraries all the time because you're going to have some interaction with someone. You're going to say hi to the staff members as you walk by. Right now, you have a folding table by the door because there's no way to get security there with the way the library is set up. That's a challenge, and you're not going to be able to fix that with handling maintenance. Drive-up window, you would get with the renovation. You would not get that with the maintenance issues. Outdoor program space, again, you would get that with the renovation. You would not get that with maintenance. The staff visibility at entries just goes again with that welcoming entry. Same thing, you get staff visibility at all of the entries, being the north and the south, with the renovation plans that you're looking at. You don't have that with maintenance. Like I said, you have a folding table there right now. Stormwater issues being addressed, you would have that in both instances, it would be covered. You'd have that in the maintenance as well as a renovation option. Electrical access to users throughout the building, you would have that in the renovation. You'd have to take down parts of your ceilings and walls to get that in any project. So it's not a maintenance issue. You really have to run conduit. You can't run cables free air in this community or any community really in the area. That's something unique to Chicago or the Chicago land. So you're not going to get that with maintenance. IT infrastructure updated and reconfigured. You have some of that going on with the maintenance, right? You're going to get some. I know the library's already budgeted for some of that work within the budget, so we gave a check mark to both sides there. Universal design principles, though, cannot be handled by maintenance. You need to renovate and get the entries to be universally accessible, especially with the restrooms, to make that happen. Last one, facility condition assessment, all items required within 10 years, handled within both. So again, if there's any questions, feel free to let me know. Is it Marjorie? Yeah?
Just raise your hand if you do as we go.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to do is a checklist. I know I had some comments when we first started out, I think a year ago with you guys, is that you like checklists. You like to see kind of, okay, what did we tell someone to do and is it being done? That's what this last page is. You gave parameters to your design team, your consultant team to follow in developing these plans. So as a check before we suggested here's a concept package for your consideration, I put together a quick checklist of how did things compare against that, especially looking at the north side main entry concept. So you asked for them to renovate and reconfigure the existing building. That's done. Address all facility condition assessment report recommendations. You've done that through 10 years and you have a reason why you're not doing a couple that are out there for 15, 20 years because you don't want to throw that money away. Potential relocation of the library entrance. You have that renovation. Universal design principles you called out specifically, you have that renovation. Interior space notes. These are notes that you said, okay, we want these things covered on the inside. That was where the primary focus was when we talked last August, I want to say this is from. Relocate the departments if needed to improve spatial and operational efficiencies. Well, obviously you've done that. You've taken youth from upstairs, moved it downstairs and expanded it. It goes right into the next check mark. Youth department space is currently inadequate and needs to be expanded to include flex story time space and teen area. That's an all the renovation option. Provide adequate access to restroom facilities. Again, that's in the renovation option. One of the comments that architects heard and listened to last board meeting was potentially putting a restroom up on the second floor. That can be accomplished up there, and the good thing about putting it up there with the renovation, if the youth department's not there, is you're not taking space away from the youth department. You're rearranging it potentially from a little bit of staff space, a little bit from the adult services, which by the program, you weren't as focused on the adult services, collections, as many books. You were more focused on the programs for the youth.
Is it going to be like 2 bathrooms?
It could be either way. I think what they wanted to do, if we go to the next step, if they went to schematic design, they provide some options and say, okay, if we put in 2, you lose this much space. If you put in 1, you lose that much space in terms of the collection that's up there, that's planned for up there, and allow the board to decide, what do you prefer? Do you prefer 1 with a little bit more space, or you prefer 2 with a little bit less space for collections? And again, not taking away program, but taking away maybe a little bit of the collection that's up there. Next one is improve the productivity and purpose and sense of place for staff spaces. I think there was a main focus on the public spaces in the renovation option. That's where you get the bang for the buck. But with that being said, the staff spaces did move around and all will be updated. So that was checked. You have youth services has a whole new office. Adult services is in a different location. Circulation gets updated. Tech services gets updated. You have updates for your staff to speak of and be proud of the library. Next one would be review the condition of the existing FF&E, as everyone knows, stands for furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. Again, that's everything from the tables and chairs to your server rack and RFID type stuff. It's all in there. And you asked for us to analyze that and for potential reuse where possible. So right now, what we're carrying, if you do a lot more of that analysis as the project goes on, keep in mind these are parameters for the whole project, not just what you're seeing now. It takes a while to develop project documents. But what we're anticipating right now is at least a 50% reuse of furniture. So we're not wanting to go and spend a whole ton of money on furniture if you're wanting to reuse where you can. There are some things though, especially if you go into the meeting rooms or study rooms, chairs have issues with them, tables have issues with them. You need to replace some things, just as you would with any library. You're going to have a cycle where you're starting to replace furniture, and same thing for equipment. Things don't last forever. Project costs. You would ask the architects to stay within an $8.5 to $9 million range. So, I put a check mark in there because as things evolved, right, we started there because we were bringing on the financial advisor. The initial thought is based on historical averages, you could have maybe borrowed a little bit more without having to go and work within your financial constraints. So they gave you a range from what ended up being 7.7 up to the higher range. They beat what they were asked to do, which we do think is commendable, because to ask a design team on day one to say, hey, look, here's a range, and give you a renovation project from day one, because they included that in the plans in January, February, and again in March. That same renovation type scheme, they actually got that underneath, which is commendable. Other thing is you would ask for adults to be considered. Exterior envelope improvement. That means the facade and how to make it look like it's an entry. That's something that is being further developed, but you are getting that envelope improvement because you're putting new entrances on the north and south side. You asked for the addition of a drive-up window. That's included in the base right now. The other thing you would ask for is look at a building addition to accommodate space increases. Well, the parameters you set out were met without the cost of an addition. Additions are very costly. At a minimum, you're looking for $400 a square foot. It could be, as you saw with the Poplar Creek, you're talking $600, $700, $800 a square foot if you go for smaller additions. They did that without having that added cost, which is commendable. Site improvements, we do have the inclusion of new landscaping so that you can see your entrance from Kingston as well as outdoor space, and then parking reconfiguration and outdoor program space. You have that in renovation plans right now. The good, better, best options for material selections, those are things that are developed once a plan, at least a direction, is determined by the board. You're not going to select all the materials before you know, okay, there is a project. And right now, the board hasn't decided on a project yet, so that's something that would be done later on. And the next page is really talks about next steps. Again, ideally today, I would like to see if there's, based on the feedback we had since the last board meeting, we knew that there was a little bit more analysis to do to figure out, using 2020 tax levy going forward, what does it align to in a project cost? Well, we've done that, so now we wanted to see if that gets us a little bit more in line with what the board's looking at to finalize that conceptual project definition package. If there's consensus, if we go through all this data today, we'll finalize that package, and that would be for the board to consider at a future meeting. So no decisions today. But, and then obviously looking forward, even if you made that decision, okay, we want to go into the next step of design to see how things progress, you're still going to have schematic design, design development, and construction documentation. Each one of those phases you'll have during the design process. Design process can be anywhere from, I think I said before, an old package, 6 to 9 months. So you'll have time to look at this, analyze it, get the plans right, get the exterior right, you get the things to be the way the board wants them to be, and still develop it before you get into construction and bidding. So that's where we're at today. I'm going to go into a little bit of the detail though. So I'm scrolling down in the board packet. The next page after this was PMA's financial information, a little bit smaller. And again, I'm going to go line by, if I can get this to zoom out, line by line for what this is, just to explain it a bit better. There we go. So what are we looking at here? And what are the acronyms? I'll start from looking at the left. So it's this side here for anyone who's following along at home. CF stands for corporate fund. So how much are you contributing to the project from your corporate fund is what these options lay out. And what you're seeing in the two green, option 1A and option 1B, those are both options for $7.7 million project costs. The board had asked PMA to come up with analysis of if there was less borrowing or if there was more borrowing and what that did to the corporate fund balance for the duration of the debt, as well as what it did to the special reserve fund to handle things that you need to handle 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. Option 2A and 2B are put together to show an $8 million project cost. Again, all four of these are using the 2020 tax levy extension as a baseline. SRF contribution amount, SRF is special reserve fund. Everyone understands that. That contribution amount was equivalent throughout all these options. Again, the delta was really how much borrowing, and the difference between the borrowing, you can see was 500,000 between these option 1A and B, and you can see that reflected in the corporate fund contribution amount being 500,000. That's where the difference is between these options. Same thing for 2A and 2B. It's a $500,000 swing either way. Next line is the annual transfer from corporate fund to special reserve. What this is you would, for audit purposes, you want to track any costs going towards a project in a way that you can audit it separately from your corporate fund. You don't want to be paying for a project like this out of corporate fund. It's just not the right way to do it for audit purposes. So you would transfer to pay for anything $97,000 from corporate fund, which is where all revenues come from, and into special reserve. Right? So you don't levy for special reserve. The annual transfer would cover all of the debt, which is in option 1A, $63,543. Why you're transferring a little bit more from corporate to special every year is you not only want to cover the debt, but you also want your special reserve fund to balance to cover things like a new roof down the line. You don't want to leave it at a low level where you're scrambling to find money 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So there's a little bit there that you're putting in every year to save. And you have that in all these different options. Next line is a corporate fund balance as a percentage at the time of contribution. So this is when the project goes and you need to use funds that you're transferring them to pay for the project. What would your corporate fund balance be once you pay for the project? In option 1A, I'll use that as my example, it's down to 48.3%. So in other words, it's about just under 6 months worth of expenses for the following year in corporate funds. It's not like you have 6 months and you dwindle down because of the way you do accounting. you have 6 months in the bank for the next fiscal year. And that happens right away. That's the 2021, 2022 fiscal year. That's what this next line is saying. When does that percentage happen or occur? The next line is, what is the low point of the corporate fund balance? Because of the tax levy and where things happen with using PMA's assumptions, your corporate fund would go down to a level of about 37.7% of an annual expense. Utilizing option 1A and option 1B is at 40.6%. And what this means is that over a number of years, so you can see that in the next line, when does that happen, that you get down to that low point? This is 2030, 2031, and option 1A, 2034, and 2035, option 1B. When you look at the projections, and I believe they showed this last month, that you're basically reducing a little bit of corporate fund until that low point's hit, and then you're coming back up a little bit slightly every year. So at the end of all the debt payment, your corporate fund, and this is a goal I think you guys had wanted to hit, was stay around 50%. For the corporate fund balance, you're still right about there, 46 and 44% for the option 1A and option 2. And the debt expiration date that they're carrying right now is 2040 and 2041. That's for all the options. You can see in comparing the $7.7 million option to the $8 million options, you can see where your corporate fund balance starts getting a bit lower, and the percent at the end of that expiration and the percent at the low point is lower as well. Just wanted to call that out. The last thing on this chart, because I know there's a lot of acronyms, is a special reserve fund balance at time of contribution. So when you go and build this project, like it's taking care of those maintenance requirements that are called out, you're not going to, you can use your special reserve fund. So the low point is right around $100,000 for all the options. That was the goal, kind of find a level so you have some money in there if you had to spend something 5 years, 7 years down the road. But you also want that to grow. So assuming that you're not really taking much money out of special reserve, I think, in talking to staff, there's a limited, I think there might have been a nominal amount, $10,000 or $15,000 you might spend from special reserve in any given year just to cover things that you have to do. If you just did that as you have historically, you would end up with $434,000 in special reserve at the end of the debt balance. And that's because of, going back, the annual transfer from corporate fund being slightly greater than the annual debt service payment. So that's why it grows a little bit. That's what this 18,713 accounts for. So that if you take the 18,713, add that to the 63,000, and then factor in the number that it's in the backup. We'll get to that sheet in a little bit. There's a number that PMA was told to utilize to carry for the future minor expenses. That's how you get to 97,000 transfer a year. I know that was a lot, and there's a lot of numbers on here. So I'm going to pause again and ask, because this is a good point for questions.
So I'll ask a question. Yeah. So right now we're transferring $300,000 a year, especially we transfer about $300,000 a year to special reserves every year, and sometimes more. So I guess, again, when PMA was here the very first time back in November of 2019, they showed up, like you said, we could borrow a lot of money based off that 300,000 because, and I know the board has discussed this, the way I'm looking at this is we got $300,000 to play with. So yeah, we're going to want to keep putting some money in special reserve, let's say $100,000, and yet you're going to want to pay some of your debt service, especially now that it's so low. It could be anywhere from $63,000 to $95,000 a year. So now you're up to about, let's say, $200,000. So to me, there's even like another $100,000 we could either be putting in special reserve, or that could be used to even, or split the difference, either put it in the reserves to keep the reserves high or higher so they don't really dip as low as you're saying, or even so we maybe don't have to increase taxes as much every year going forward as well.
So to answer that, actually, I'll jump ahead, because what PMA did, and when you're transferring, I'm going to skip through a bunch of pages here. When you're transferring that funding, historically, you've been able to do that because you were working off previous fiscal year tax levies, right? And the tax levy has been reduced I want to say, what, the past 3 years, 4 years, if not more.
3 years.
3 years.
3 years. And so that hits the fiscal year, almost 2 fiscal years, calendar years later, June of the second fiscal year later. When they looked at the analysis, and actually you'll see it here momentarily, if you were, even this next year, transferring, one more year using the next tax levy year, if you were to transfer 300,000, you'd actually be transferring at a deficit, not because you have surplus. You've taken, the board has taken a step to align the revenues, assuming that you take CPI growth forward, with expenses, because expenses, we all know, everything gets more expensive every year. You look at, go to your grocery bill and compare it to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it grows, right? So at some point you need to have your revenues grow roughly parallel to that. You're at that point now with the levies that you've incorporated most recently, the 2020 tax levy. So in other words, you don't have a surplus of 300,000 every year going forward. So I pulled it up here. If you look at, I want to say this is page, everyone following along, 51 of the board packet. This is tough on this computer here. It's a blue chart. Hopefully everyone can see that. Here are your $300,000 transfers that you've made historically and that you've budgeted for. So in the past, even with making those $300,000 transfers, you still end up with a net change in fund balance. In other words, a small net surplus, right? As you go forward, because now we're taking property taxes at the 2020 tax levy year and going forward with the 2020, that's what we're looking at here, you no longer have that net surplus. You have a net deficit. So that deficit shrinks as you go forward. And that's what you see in the next page is a continuation. Like this is, you can see at the top of the page, this is 2017, 2018 actuals. And it goes through 24, 25. You can see the next page goes from 25, 26 all the way to 33. And the next one goes all the way to, I think this should go all the way to 40, all the way to 40, 41. You can see by the time you get to, if you were to take CPI growth every year based on the 2020 fiscal year, you would have a net change in fund balance in the positives by 20 years from now. You don't have to do that. Boards can decide not to take the CPI growth. But the break-even point, if you look at it, and I'm just looking at this net change in fund balance, is you'd be running a slight deficit up until you're at that low point in corporate fund. That's that delta. And that would happen in this option. This is the, I think, $7.7 million option in fiscal year ending June 2030. What they really tried to do was align your revenues, which we know they're capped. You can't grow them anymore in this option more than the CPI growth. So it's basically a rate of inflation. Not exactly, but that's the simplistic way of talking about it. You're capping that based off the 2020 levy year extension. So in other words, if you were to take another 300,000 and transfer it more than the 90, they're showing 97,000, Tom, if you see that in the transfers. If you were to say another 200,000, your net change in fund balance would be negative 200,000 in all this every year. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but I would probably work it out for myself still that, I mean, even if you're, that's fine, even if you're taking the tax increase going forward, plus you got that extra $100,000 to play with, so to speak, I still don't see how you should be running. I mean, even if you take the tax increases, I still don't, some of that, I would have to work.
No, that's fine. And I think
that still doesn't add up.
Well, a highlight actually is, let's look at one other thing. So everyone following along, I'm back at the first page, page 51, total revenue. So these are projected actuals based on your levies, right, for 2020, 2021. Your revenue, including property taxes, TIF, replacement tax, and you can see these are all projections going forward, is 3.8 million and change. Your total expenditures is 3.7. And the reason why, and actually this is a good conversation point, when PMA first gave the presentation, right, what they had was the historical information. And that was showing the delta, like Tom, like you just said, $300,000 gap between revenues, expenses historically every year. when the levies are taken down, like it's typically happened, typically what you see is expenses being taken down in a parallel manner. When we sat in, when PMA was brought on to do the analysis, so that, in February, we brought them on, they did the analysis between February and March. They sat down with the library staff and said, okay, let's look at expenses, where can cuts happen, or what has happened historically, and let's project forward what can happen. And really, the library has done a good job in maintaining a control on the expenditures to the point where really there wasn't a way that you could be we couldn't advise that they saw a way to reduce expenditures enough to parallel the tax levy reduction that's been put in place the past 4 years. And if they did, it would put the library in a fiscal constraint where you might not be able to afford things at that point. And they didn't want to recommend that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that obviously once the reserves go down, obviously the interest income will go down, but I still think, I mean, it's even with, like I said, still using the tax increases going for 2020, I still, it's obviously all these are projections. I don't just, maybe it's just being ultra conservative because I don't know if it would be, it just doesn't, I don't know. I'm still having a tough time reconciling some of this stuff, but that's fine. If anything, this seems a little, which is fine to have.
You want to be conservative, yes.
Yeah,
honestly, that's the point. Yeah, they are not being aggressive because you don't want to be aggressive. If they were aggressive, then you'd have to, for the 20-year duration, the library board, theoretically, if not everything fell in place the way they were projecting, was too aggressive, you would really be forced to take either the max CPI growth every year for 20 years, or look at, okay, where can I cut services, right? And so what they wanted to do was to say, you know what, take a conservative approach. If things happen and fall into place better than projected, well, then the board can decide not to take the CPI growth at some point, right? Because that's a decision every year. The board looks at finances and looks at where things are happening and gets to make.
And this net change in fund balance is just the corporate fund balance.
Yes. So
if you did add in this, at least for the next year, the special reserve balance, it's a wash. The 300 transfer is a wash. It's a transfer out, it's a transfer in.
Well, it's not this year. Because this calendar, sorry, 2020, 21, we actually are running a net fund change deficit of 229. You are right. You're adding that to special reserve, so when you're looking at this offline or even now, the special reserve pages, they did 3 pages for corporate fund to get it across all the years.
Yeah.
The special reserve pages are these gray ones, which are 3 pages later, and it shows the transfers in 300,000. And also, since we're looking at option 1A, shows the future transfers in from corporate fund of 97,000. I'll go into this a little bit more detail because I do want to explain the highlights and the footnotes.
Yeah, but I guess that's my
Is this
point.
a good?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say though. Like for at least year 1 here, it's
Yes.
a wash. It's
Yes.
Even if you put $229,000 deficit in the corporate fund, your special reserve balance will go up. So really, the revenue over expenditures of 70,357 in theory also is your total net fund balance when you take off almost all your funds, at least corporate and special.
Yes, you got it.
So if I look at that though going forward, I know what you're saying though about corporate fund and special reserve fund going forward in future years, but still a lot of that's ins and outs too. Yes, you do want to replenish your special reserve fund, but your total fund balances still would be probably running that small.
Well, I guess what we could do.
I know it's kind of,
No, it's a good question. I think what we could do if there's an inkling towards one of these options, right? That concept package that you're going to get as a final, okay, this is the concept information, is going to include all this finalized for what you want to see. And I think one of the things we can add to this that might help is I don't know if it's a total fund balance number, in other words, it takes corporate fund and you add that to add special reserves so you can see what the total is going forward. That might answer your question.
Yeah, let me see. I'm sorry, I was kind of hogging up the conversation. Has any other trustees got a question or comment on this? So,
Maybe we can go back to the pro
Oh, I'm
forma.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, let me ask this. I know between the people here, at least, since we're seeing it on the screen a little bit larger, should I go through the footnotes on this page since we're looking at this page at this point, or do you want me to come back to this page later?
I think just go back from where you
Yeah.
were,
Okay.
and then it'll make more sense going in order.
You got it. So, sorry, I'm using the computer without my native software, so. Turn the library, let me get it back to where we want it. Right. So where we left off,
You're on page 6.
we page 6. This is PMA's page. I think we covered all of this. I'm going to jump to the next topic, which would be project costs. So this is PMA's information is how they did their analysis to afford a project, 7.7. So the next stuff this is the information CCS put together. Again, this is to develop a budget. This is not what your project would cost. This is how we work. As you guys have known, we've worked on, I can't even tell you how many libraries. At least in the local area, over 30 libraries, nationwide, over 100. We always develop a pro forma. The pro forma is what we track all of your project costs against as the project goes forward. So how do we develop that? And we use some standard templates to make sure we capture everything, all the parts and pieces, but we customize them to your project. So I'm going to go through the summary page in a little bit of detail. Other pages, I'll kind of go through some lines. You can ask questions if you'd like. So this is a summary page. So your land cost, you're not buying any land, that's 0. Your bond costs, and this is a draft, so we're going to finalize this and tweak it. As of right now, PMA has said any bond costs are captured in the net bond proceeds. In other words, if they're saying you have a $7.7 million project because your bond proceeds are $1 million, your bond cost, the actual bond is going to cover any of the costs of that bond issuance. We'll reconfirm that and make sure that's accurate, but that's what we're assuming right now. The building cost is $5.7 million. That is the cost that we want to budget for the construction of your project. Professional service costs are your primary consultants, which is your design team, and your main consultants that are taking on the liability to design the project. The specialized consultants might be, if you're looking at putting in a new elevator, your architect isn't an elevator specialist. You wouldn't want them designing all the mechanicals for your elevator. You bring on an elevator consultant who does it. It's a small fee, but you talk about an elevator or whatever else, you have to have those fees covered somewhere. That's what the specialized is. And the owner provided services, we'll take a look at that a little bit later on. When you do any construction project of any value, you have builder's risk insurance to cover any liability the district would have. You also have legal fees for reviewing contracts and things of that nature. There's more detail behind this. This is a summary page, and we'll go into that detail momentarily. Again, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that's what FF&E stands for. You can see how that's built up. We have over $500,000 for furniture. That's including moving costs, because if you're going to talk about phasing, a while back, if you're going to maintain services in the library, right, you're in phase the project, you're going to have to move things around to make it work, and you're going to move things into the final place so that you don't get folks damaged or humidity issues or whatever else. So that moving costs have to be included somewhere, and there are companies that you bring on to do that. Contractors. Fixtures, again, we'll go through what that is, and equipment, we'll go through what that is in a little bit more detail. All of this is put together, and you get the subtotal, $7.4 million. Right now, you have a total of 2 to 3 drawings per option that's being considered, right? We're just at the very beginning of this. So we have an owner's project cost contingency in there to cover any unforeseen things that might pop up. When you take that on the ceiling, because we haven't done that yet, what's behind there? You can't do that until you're in construction. You want to have a project contingency that the owner controls. Hopefully you don't have to use any of those. Typically you use some of it, and typically you don't use all of it, and that goes back to either special reserve or whatever else. But that's 3% we feel is it's somewhat aggressive for a smaller project, right? Typically in a smaller project you have a little higher value than a larger project, so dollar amounts go up. But 3% we feel is about right for your project size. Project total cost. This would be your budget. It's $7.7 million rounding. That's how we get to it. You can see the chart below really covers what, what's the percentage of those different costs. And again, like I said, typically the construction cost is about 70 to 80% of a project cost. And you can see here, when we actually, we'll see the detail in a minute, it's not just throwing darts at things. These are actual numbers that we're trying to use. We got it, it's at 75%. So that's in line with norms. And also in line with the examples that we had shown. Villa Park was one, and others that were shown before. So this is a summary page, and keep in your mind this 5.7 number, because that's going to be the next page I cover. The 888 number is the page after that, and the 840 number is the page after that. So you can see the detail where those come from. So here's your 5.7 number. That includes your construction costs. That's what your general contractor, that's our budget number. Hopefully they come in more aggressive because we did this competitively and everything else. That's what your budget would be. You have a change order contingency. Again, that's in case there's change orders to that contractor. And that is very typical of every project, and 2% is really about right, if not aggressive again. Phasing allowance. If you're phasing things, you're going, whether you're phasing or you're closing the library and moving somewhere temporarily, you're going to have costs. If you move somewhere temporarily, you're going to have to rent space. If you phase it, you're going to have to put up some temporary walls and things of that nature. We don't know what that is yet because we don't have the plans all developed, right? So 150,000 we threw in there as an allowance to cover phases. And right now, if you think about it, I'm showing 2 phases for construction. But when you think about it, there's a few moves, right? Your first move is you're going to have to phase is the library will have to vacate certain areas to allow for construction. The first phase. First phase of construction completes. The library then moves into that section of the building that's done, and occupies it and moves out of the other side. Then, after the second phase is complete, you move into the whole building. So there's some moving parts and temporary walls and things that contractors have to build to make sure everyone's safe. That's what that is. And the permit cost, again, this is something that once we have a handle on really where the project costs are going, whether it's used or not, we have coverage in there that you have to go get a permit for things. That's what makes up this 5.7. I also provided a summary of what's included of the 5.460 number. That's your general contractor. And this is a summary of, okay, general conditions, overhead and profit. That's what your general contractor costs. Again, this is a very early parametric estimate level. For supervision, for any of the safety stuff they have to do, any of their costs internally for fencing and all the stuff that goes along with building a commercial building. Foundations, you don't have an addition. There is a little bit of a foundation work to put on some columns for new entries. You have a covered new entry. You have a substructure, which is, again, putting in some columns and concrete to make that to last. Superstructure, which is the shell and making adjustments to the new entries, the awnings, as well as the new south entry when you're adding that elevator space and that split stair that was talked about last meeting. You're going to have some structural work. So that's whether it's steel or whatever else. I would think it's steel right now, not concrete. That's what that costs. Exterior enclosure. What this consists of right now essentially is windows, a little bit of roofing, and then taking care of the masonry and I think it was tuck pointing and painting a lot of the exterior to make it come up to snuff. That was a lot of facility condition requirements. Roofing, you're only adding a small amount of roofing on the new entries. Interior construction is where a bulk of a lot of the money is spent. That's your wall costs, your doors, your paint, your flooring, ceilings, all of that fun stuff. Conveying systems is the elevator itself, not the shell around it, but an elevator. Mechanical costs, this is the cost to move all the ductwork. I think people who aren't in the industry and seeing what goes on in these commercial buildings, you think, okay, I have a furnace, I have an air conditioning unit, I have one main trunk of ducts, and it just pushes air all the way through. Well, that's not how commercial construction works. You're going to have air handling units, which you already took care of. That we're not factoring and replacing those. Those are existing remaining. Spent the money on it. Let's make use of those. What you do have to do is rerun your duct work to fit the new floor plan. What you also do is look at the what's called variable fan boxes or basically up above the ceiling that we're in the meeting room right now, there's equipment that actually is basically pushing the air around, because you can't just rely on your air hunting units way back in the system. There's equipment here that handles it, 50, 70, 100, 200 feet down the line. That's got to be taken care of. So this mechanical cost is all the ductwork to do that, all the wiring, because it has to be controlled by an automation system. You can't just, it's not just like a thermostat in your house. It's got to be automated. That's all that costs. Electrical costs, that includes all your bringing all your devices up to speed. That includes, people don't always think about it, but you have to, if you're changing walls around, you're looking at fire alarm. You have to make that right. You also have to make sure any of the security systems, your data systems, your IT systems, all that cabling is put into and run correctly up to code. That's what's in all that number. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, mechanical to a contractor, and mechanical engineers cover movement of fluids in that, right? So that's your air as well as your water. So that's all your plumbing numbers also in there for the bathrooms. Forgot to mention that. Last thing, you have your site work. That's parking lot, and we'll go through in a little bit more detail what's in there. And contingencies. Again, we have 2 documents right now to base this off of. Now, CCS, we have a long history of doing these projects, so we're able to use it in historical data. And what you'll see in the next pages is a model, a computer model that actually says, okay, this is how many rooms we have. This is how big the rooms are. Are we going to paint it? Are we going to put tile in it? Are we going to put a new ceiling in it? What are the costs associated with that? How we apply it to all the rooms? So it's a very, I'd say, sophisticated model that builds all this in. But we also have contingencies to cover anything that we don't see today, because we're at step 1. And by the end of this, we're going to have 100 pages with all kinds of details and ceilings poked and prodded, and we need to cover for that. So you get to this construction cost. Now that all this one page, that is just for the $5.7 million. You can see the 460, there's 5460, there's the 5460, and builds into 57747. The next page, like I said, is the $888,000 line item. This is your professional services cost. We're carrying it right now. We'd have to go negotiate things, right? We're carrying costs based on historical averages, being somewhat aggressive, and that you're not hiring Frank Gehry to do your building. You're not paying Frank Gehry fees. So we're trying to be somewhat aggressive there to cover, but we want to cover that you're getting the right drawings, because if you don't, it's a lot cheaper to spend money on having someone do a drawing than to have a contractor come in, pay for ductwork or pay for walls or whatever else, and it's not right, because having to redo that with a contractor is going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, versus the $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 that you'd have to pay for to get someone to redo a drawing. So that's why we want to make sure that's a good number to get your drawings right. And we really hold the design team to get them right. And that also includes architecture, structure, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. That's what this MEP, FP, that's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection. Interior design, and your specification drawings. Specialized consultants, oh no. Sorry, getting used to the Zoom. Specialized consultants, this includes things like landscape consultants, if you're going to do that, which this project is right now. Civil, which you would do because you're moving some stormwater and handling that. Technology consultants, because you're going to be upgrading technology. The AV, elevator, which was my example from earlier. A lighting consultant to make sure that you're getting the right lighting and competitive cost for it. Signage potentially. We want to make sure that we have the right people doing the right things, so you're not paying for it down the road. That's going to cost a heck of a lot more to pay for. Cost estimating, I took this down a little bit from what we'd seen before, but what we typically do on these projects is a small fee to make sure things are on track as the project is going. So this is covering basically the cost of 2 estimates during the design phase. Last one is a land surveyor. That's if you're going to do stormwater management, whatever else, you need to have an up-to-date survey. You need to have someone out here putting stakes in and surveying the land. That's what that would mean. Again, all of these, we're trying to be, we're setting a budget. We'd go and competitively bid or shop all of these items. And the last thing was the owner. That was one of the items that we talked about as well. You can see material testing up there. You can see builder's risk insurance. That's the insurance policy that the library district would get to cover your liabilities while people are working in your building. legal counsel, and then any reimbursables. Reimbursables, hopefully, are not really used all that much, but it's, if there's some special printing thing or whatever else, you're printing stacks of blueprints, your architect usually has reimbursables to print all this for everybody if you want a copy. Same thing for maybe a legal counsel or something like that. You have that in there to cover it so you don't get caught, handcuffed later on. Next page is the FF&E. Again, we're looking at reusing office furniture where we can. We're looking at reusing public space furniture where you can. Shelving, what you're looking at reusing your existing shelving, not replacing it. What you look at doing is replacing the end panels so that the wood or whatever piece is in the outside, so that way you can bring it up to code. Talking to staff, it seemed like a fiscally responsible thing to do, and that you don't have to go out and buy a whole bunch of metal and redo shelving. It's fine right now. It's actually a good thing. A little anecdote. We found out actually recently that Amazon is buying 50% of the steel available in the US next year. The steel costs are going way up. I wouldn't want to be buying shelving that are built from steel and metals the year that Amazon's buying 50% of the steel, because it means all of us, normal people, are competing for the other 50% that's available next year. So probably a prudent thing to do, not buying it next year. Moving and storage, again, that's trying to get your books moved, your people moved, whatever it is, you're going to have those contractors and a contingency. I could see having to spend a little bit maybe more on maybe moving a little bit more, so you're having to move a little bit more than we're anticipating now. Again, 2 drawings to go off of. Fixtures, that's signage. You go into any 21st century library and people can see where they're walking in. You walk in, you see, okay, here's youth, here's adult, you have a front door sign, you're gonna have some costs with that. Especially interiors, that might be a placard. You guys have talked about a donation wall or something, whether it's brick or a wall, and that would be where that would fall. Artwork, framing artwork might be something you're looking at. Maybe they don't have to use all of it, but it's a placeholder for now, make it a little contingency. Equipment, we have a book drop. We have RFID and technology upgrades. So this is an allowance from talking to staff. Some of it has already been spent or budgeted from, and this is the remaining balance that the upgrades that you're looking at making. This is the amount that would cover it. So it's within the project cost. It doesn't have to be in your yearly budget. IT general allowance, that's for the stuff in the server room. Your data cabling, so actually running the cables, that's in the construction costs. It doesn't have to be held here. We'd have the contractor do that. Upgrading the phone system, upgrading the AV equipment allowance. That's making sure the meeting rooms have already AV. Study rooms might have a little bit of AV nowadays to handle the 21st century library requirements. Same thing with security and CCTV. And then you have a little contingency. And this is not an extravagant cost. We're working on another library right now, and their FF&E budget for is roughly $1.6 million. So you're about half of what that is. And that was not a budget we came up with. That was what they got. So you can see you're being prudent right now. The next page is I'm going to go. This is you're kind of seeing behind the scenes how we build the $5.460 million construction cost. This is an Excel program, and actually there's a specialty estimating system that is used that puts together these what we call parametric estimates. So the first couple of pages are just outlining, okay, what are we looking at? It's the drawings put together from Sheehan, Nagle, Hartree, and assuming a normal market condition, and you get qualified subcontractors bidding it. This is just saying what it includes and what it doesn't include. Oop. Where it says this estimate excludes things, you can see all these things. So this estimate is just the construction cost. It does not include the project cost, which is why you have the pro forma to cover all that other stuff. All of this is up in the pro forma. It's not included in this 5.46 million estimate. Going through, this is page 13 of your packet. 13 and 14 are your summary pages. These are all the parts and pieces, and these numbers align to that summary we went through on the pro forma for foundation, substructure, superstructure. And it starts to break it down to even further detail. How much are you spending on the superstructure? How much are you spending on, are we anticipating for budget purposes to reconstruct the floors for that south entry? How about for the roof construction or stair construction? Exterior walls, exterior doors and windows. You can start to see where things are aligning, right? Interior construction, you can say put some notes on there. Partitions. That partition costs Includes the walls themselves, the doors, the paint, and base trim, things of that nature. Finishes are your ceilings and floors. Specialties are your casework, any of the countertops, any built-ins, things that not everyone sees because a lot of them are behind the scenes that staff need to do their job. You go into any staff department, you look on the walls, and you typically see some base cabinets, a countertop. Some of them have sinks, some of them don't, and a lot of the work gets done on those countertops. That's what that is. That's what casework is. If you were to go and buy casework for your home, your kitchen cabinets are casework. That explains it. Conveying systems are your elevators. Again, mechanical, like I talked about, that includes your plumbing, your ductwork, your systems and air connections for that, your fire protection. We don't have any special systems. That's just a line item in the system. That's if you're doing labs and things like that. You're not doing that. That's page 1 of the summary. Page 2 of the summary, it goes on to the electrical costs. Again, same thing, service and distribution. In the facility condition assessment, they did call out that you have some service and distribution issues. You need to take care of those to get the phasing right to electrical, so it's safe. Other thing is you want to have lighting and power. Well, this is assuming we're going to upgrade the lighting and power throughout the building. Put an LED efficient fixture so you start saving some money in the operating cost of the building. Special systems here is your data cabling, any of the low voltage, so fire alarm, data cabling, phone systems, all the cables, not the systems themselves. We don't have any equipment, F and E, you can see that again, fixed and movable equipment furnishings. That's all in your project pro forma. We're not doubling up, that's 0. Site work, you can see how we've broken up all those components. The preparation is really your demo, so taking down parts of the building, demoing certain section of the site. Site improvements includes you'll see a listing of those in a minute. And site utilities, you see a listing of those in a minute. And then contingencies, again, I keep on saying it, I'm sorry I'm being repetitive. You have 2 drawings to work off of right now, when you're going to end up with hundreds, and your spec book is going to be literally hundreds of pages long to get it right. That number will go down and will be included in the items above as we go through the next estimates, because they'll become real things. We'll know what they are. We'll know what, that's this piece of equipment or whatever else. So basically that number will, as you go through the process, that I think is roughly 10% or something, 15%. The next estimate that you see after you get the DD package, that number might be 10%. When you're in construction documentation, halfway through that number might be 5%. It's just to make sure that you have all the things covered and you're not stuck with, when you're doing a budget, the wrong number. Escalation, escalation we are assuming right now, especially with the costs, I don't know if anyone's bought a 2x4 lately at Home Depot. Go take a look at what that costs today versus what it cost last year or 2 years ago. It's about 100% to 200% more. Some of those things are mitigating factors because of COVID. So, some are going up, but historically, costs escalated about 3% per year, 3 to 4% per year, every year. So if you put just to put it in context, if you put this scope of work off, another year or 2 years, that percentage would go up. It wouldn't be 4%, it would be 4 times 4. 4 times 4 times 4 if you go a third year. So we are assuming in this estimate that the midpoint of construction, that's what you have to estimate off of, is the middle of next year. So we're assuming that a project is next year. If the board decides they don't want to do it this year or want to think about it more, delay it a little bit, we take a look and we'd adjust that number to make sure you cover escalation. So every page after this is all of the systems, all of the systems documentation and data for what's included in this cost. You typically actually don't see this in board packets or summaries, so I know it was important for the board to see the data and know what's going on. Why we do this information, why we have it, is so that when the designer goes and they start designing buildings and everything else, we have a historical record of what was approved in that 5.46 or the $7.7 million, and we can track it against it. So we know that if all of a sudden that exterior awning, instead of being 800 or 600 square feet or whatever it might be, is 800 square feet, well, I can go back to the designer and say, hey guys, when you did this originally, 600 square feet, costs are going up because you made it bigger, bring it back. The board didn't approve that cost. So that's what all these pages are here for. So this one page, this is your page 16, is the shell and core. This is defining what is, column footing, foundation wall, slab on grade, all these different elements. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail. You can do that if you'd like, but this is defining what is included in those numbers, all the parts and pieces. It is a historical record so that we can control costs and control the project as it moves forward. We don't want to pick a number with a dartboard and then try to hold designers to it, because it gets nearly impossible to do. Same thing with the next page is, pages, what is this, year 14, or sorry, year 17, skip through. 17, 18, keep going, 19, 20, again, this is all the public packet, 21, 22. These are all of the spaces that we've been able to pull out from the plans you have. On the left side, every one of those pages I just scrolled through has a program square footage. This is the program that when the designers sat down with staff, they came up with what's the right size of these spaces, and or, in an ideal world, if you're starting from scratch, right? If you didn't have an existing building, what size would you want these spaces being? You know that, I'll use technical services. This is a good example. The technical services department right now in your two-page plan is a box, right? But there's multiple pieces within that you divide that space up into. That's what all these pieces are right here. That's the square footages. You have, manager workstation, you have a staff workstation, you have a collaboration area, cart staging, folks have to be on somewhere. All of those are added up. On the plans we have today, that's what this next column is, we don't have all those areas carved up, because it happens later on in design. So what we took out is how much square footage is in that area. And this is based on what the current plans are today. That'll change as the plans evolve, but it's a way to capture it and be able to track things. And also it captures, okay, how many spaces consist of that 1,100 square foot. So in other words, at 1,170, that actually consists of 3 walled spaces. We know it's going to be 3. You're going to have a wall potentially around a workstation, a wall for some storage, and things like that. So that's where it breaks up. Everything on the right is the computer calculation. When you add in, what does a wall cost? You have to paint it. Actually, before you paint it, you have to mud it and tape it. Then you have to paint it. You have to put base trim on it. You have to put doors in it. All of that is in here, and that feeds into the summaries. This is all that you're seeing, like I said, behind the scenes, all of the information of what these costs or what these rooms are.
And I know these are just examples, but before you move on, can you go through some of the acronyms at the top there? Like
Sure.
the PTN.
Yep. No problem.
Yeah.
So starting from left, the spaces, and you can see the breakdown of spaces. Hopefully that's self-explanatory. If not, let me know. Program is what, and this is what I think we met in January originally, January or December with Sheehan Engelhardt, and they talked about they were sitting down with your staff and pulling together a program of spaces. That's what they mean. Program isn't the activities going on. To an architect, the program is how many spaces, what types of spaces. And SF stands for square foot, so think of square feet. Number of space, that's how many number of those that there are. Total square footage here is obviously, this is the actual takeoff. So everything to the right of this line on all these pages is the plans that we've actually come up with. Average square footage is actually a calculation. So there's within this 1,170 square feet, there are 3 spaces that we know are the 3 different walls. You have to build walls for all those. So your average square footage there is 390 square feet. If you take a square root of that and you times it by 2, because if you have multiple squares, this is how we're getting too detailed, but basically you have partitions. We have to come up with how many lengths of partition. PTN stands for partition. Think of partition as walls. That's what PTN is again here. It's the length of walls, the cost per linear foot of a wall. Demo is demo. It's taking down ceilings or taking down floor finishes or taking down walls, depending on what's going on where. That's where you can see there's a difference. When we're just taking up finishes like a floor and a ceiling, that's $3 here. In some areas, you'll see it up as high as 10, where you have to demo, like your new public stair. You have to demo structure around it. You're taking down more than just walls or carpets and ceilings. That's why there's a delta. Doors, we all know what that is. Again, dollars per space. So every room that going into, you have a door. Floors, dollars per square footage. It's the floor finish. Ceiling is CLG. That stands for ceiling.
I would never guess.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Mechanical, electrical, it's ELECT, and equipment. Equipment is combined with special, and what special is, I'll show you that in a minute, but when we talked about that casework number, that's what that is. We didn't have this model, that's how they build it up. It's where you you're putting in cabinets and counters and sinks and things like that. You need to count that somewhere. That gets to your total cost for those pieces. And that's your cost per square foot for this space. So hopefully it's enough info to kind of see it. And typically, like I said, typically this is only used for historical data so we can track what the design team's doing. This is what builds up your budget. You're seeing all the detail going back down to nitty gritty. We talked about site preparation. So what are we doing for site preparation? That's what this next page is. This is, I think you're page 23. You have some selective existing parking pavement. Yeah.
Question, Mark.
Oh, yeah.
Vice President Bartelli.
Mark, on page 22 in the packet,
Yep.
there's no total for those several categories that you just went over with us.
Yes, it's intentional. Okay.
I'm sorry?
That is intentional. I'll listen to your whole question. I'm sorry for jumping in.
Okay. I just wanted to know,
So,
you say intentional.
yep, it's
Why?
intentional. We know, so everything left of this dark line is the program that we know that there's these types of spaces going on in technical services as a category. So I know that there is a manager's workstation. There are multiple staff workstations, so that's 320 divided by 5, not times 5. You have a collaboration work area with the sink that takes up space, it's 50 square feet, and you have to move around it. Cart staging, these are all the spaces. It hasn't been designed yet, right? Right now, if you look at your plan, and actually I think I have it up. Let me show you real quick. So keep in mind, this is technical services, so I'll use that as an example. And you have all these different components of technical services that take up space. Right now, in your plans that we're trying to price things off of, this is your board packet, the public packet from last meeting that we were at, 324. Technical services, if I zoom in here, hopefully this computer works the way mine does. You can see technical services this is actually your existing wall outline. It's one big room, right? So I don't know how that room is being broken up yet because that happens in later design stages. So what I'm looking at right now is I have to take off the area of this room. That's 1,170 square feet, which includes all of these idealized world spaces. Sometimes this total square footage on the right might be a little bit larger than the program square footage, because again, the program is an ideal world, and technical services is a good example. To save costs, we are keeping these outline walls, we're not demoing them. So even if it's a little bit larger, it makes sense cost-wise to leave it a little bit larger, make the best use of the costs that you have. And in some instances, it might be a little bit smaller. So that's why there's these numbers won't add up to the right side of the line numbers.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on this?
I had a question on, excuse me, on page 12 of the packet.
Okay.
Excuse me, under the notes regarding this estimate,
Mhm.
your very last line in that paragraph, escalation is included,
Yes.
assuming 1 year to the midpoint of construction. 2 questions. What happens after the midpoint? Is there escalation budgeted for that? And the next question that would tie into that would, how long do you anticipate the renovation to take? So you talk about a midpoint of construction.
Mhm. So the way you have to estimate this when you don't have all the detail right is you're going to buy it from a contractor at some point. If we want to talk in broad ranges right now, your design phase could be 6 to 8 months, somewhere in that range, 6 to 8, 6 to 9 months. At that point, if you're doing a traditional design it, then you bid it to get it bid competitively in the street for everything, and then you build it. That bid phase would occur what, at the end of this year, roughly at the end of this year, let's call it. You then start construction at the beginning of next year. This is a rough guide. Looking at this project, and we're trying to work with the architects this week actually to work on some phasing ideas that we can talk to staff about. But construction could take, if you're doing 2 phases, maybe in the range of 10 months, maybe plus or minus a month or 2 months, whatever it is, because you have to do phase 1, you move, and then phase 2. So our midpoint of construction would be 1 year roughly from today, which if I start construction in January of next year, add five months to that to get to the midpoint, I'm in April, May. So that's why this escalation is included to the midpoint of the year. And what happens to your question about what about after that midpoint, when you buy it from a general contractor, you're buying it for that price. So if you bought it at the end of this year, that cost would stay. You're buying a hard lump sum number for the whole project. We have to figure out, they're going to do analysis on their end that everything before the midpoint might be a little bit more cost or less cost to them. Everything a little bit after might be a little bit more, but it basically washes. So that's why you estimate to the midpoint at this point. Now again, this is not what your contractor is going to, what you're going to pay them, right? You're not going to sign a contract for this dollar amount. We're going to competitively bid this amongst a number of contractors, and you'll be able to select the number and the contractor you want from there. But we want to give you a midpoint landing spot. And then you said about, so that was your first question. So, everything before the midpoint might be a little bit less, everything after might be simplistically, might be a little bit more. It washes out as an average. Your second question was about, I wrote renovation down, but can you remind me? Sorry, I got lost in my.
Well, do you have an estimate on the entire length of the renovation time period?
I would think 10 to 12 months, depending on how it's phased. It seems about right the way we're looking at it preliminarily right now. It may be a little quicker if you do it in one phase, but that means you're moving out of the whole building, which, from what we had heard, we'll do some analysis, but it doesn't sound like that makes sense. You want to provide services during the process. So, I would think if you're phasing it into 2 phases, where it is going to be, cumbersome on staff to do those moves and that, but it's possible and it's really common to do. That looks to be about 10 to 12 months.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to jump down now to my site improvements page, and I'm sorry this is taking so long. I just wanted to make sure you all had the detail that I did and you weren't confused by what's on there.
Well, and part of this meeting.
Mark, can I interject here for a second? Because I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of lost with all the numbers. I feel like I'm past in the weeds and I'm in the ground.
You are.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I come back to it, right? You've broken out for us how you get to these costs. You've outlined several options. I mean, what is, I guess I'm going to say is like, what is the ask here? I know we're an hour and 40 minutes into this, but what is the ask that is trying to be told of us here? I don't mean that in such a direct way. This is very detailed and I appreciate it. But I mean, every number now is pretty much the exact same. And I would like to get to like what the core of the discussion is supposed to be.
So
Let me jump in really quickly. So this meeting was called because there were some trustees wanted more clarification as to the north side entry, and I know that some trustees wanted to see a projection using the 2020 extension versus the 2018. And so what CCS was asked to do is provide detail, and maybe we went a little too far with the detail.
Yep.
But we didn't want to leave trustees kind of floating with all of the spreadsheets that were provided. So I did ask Mark to walk through each section, not necessarily line by line, but section by section, just so everybody understood what was provided. And we can open it up now to have trustees ask questions about certain sections if some weren't clear. But we did want, I know that some trustees really wanted some more clarification. There was some sticker shock that was mentioned, and so hopefully this provides more, use it again, clarity and there were some comparisons asked. If trustees wanted more comparisons, and I think that was provided as well. So yes, I think we comprehensively walked through a lot, and if there are further questions, I think we can open that up.
And Trustee Duffy, you're dead on, because I can't remember ever going through that parametric estimate with any other board. It's typically not done, but I think, there were some questions ahead of the meeting, and let's go through them. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. And so now, hopefully, we're all on the same page. And getting back to your question, besides any discussion here, hopefully at the end of this meeting tonight, you can go through and say, okay, CCS and Director Weinstein, please task the designers as well as the financial advisors to finalize the concept package for one of these options that you'd like us to package that for you to consider moving forward with. And you're not considering that tonight, but that is, which one of these do you want to package? Because we're not going to package, you can see all that data. That's all just for one option. We're not going to package 5 different options. You'll have binders coming out of your offices. We want to pick on one to package and move forward with. So with all this analysis, all this information, it's a 7.7 using 2020 levy year extension, the one that we should package that information off of, because when we left last time, that perception at that point was an $8 million. But after we looked at this and the board feedback and discussion, which is very healthy to do, it's when you want to do this now, not later. It seems like that 7.7 number is where things were headed.
And I don't want to take up, to be honest with you, Mark, I'm not aware of all the questions that were asked post last meeting. So if what you're going through is addressing that, I don't want to, if other trustees want that, I go with it. It just caught me off guard a little bit because I'm not aware of exactly what we were all trying to address here. So that's fine. I continue with it. I don't want to, I think if it's addressing the questions that were asked, I think you should do it.
I think we covered most of it. Like Director Weinstein said, if there's more questions than that, we can keep on going. We'll answer your direct questions. If not, open up the discussion for you. Really, it's about you guys discussing and clarifying the sticker shock, I guess.
Well, may I?
Yeah, Vice President Bartali, go ahead.
Well, I think seeing this in such detail, Mark, as far as the sticker shock goes, it's an eye opener for me. I had no idea of these costs. You can throw out a number, 7.7 million, and until you see these line by line items, I realize we're not going to understand what each line item is, but I'm more comfortable in that I see the contingencies that are built into that. Now that's, it's not etched in stone. I understand that, but from my perspective, I'm more comfortable seeing the line items, although I don't understand each item. It is lengthy, and like you say, probably not every board asks for these because it is so detailed. But I think possibly a suggestion would be, from what we've gone through so far, does anybody really have specific questions to ask that aren't answered in all of this detail?
Does any other trustees have a question? Since we're here. Pardon?
Or comments?
Or comments, questions, comments?
I have one.
Go for it, Vice President.
The library will close in 15 minutes. If you wish to apply for or renew a library card, please do so now.
We talk about some of our maintenance projects and so on. So how, as we're budgeting so on, how do we pay for some of the repeating maintenance items, that come upon us at, 5, 10, 15 years in over this 20-year debt service. Is that, I guess I should ask the director that more, will our general budget or cover things like that? Because we are reducing our reserves and so on. I'm concerned about the maintenance aspect 5, 10, 15 years in.
I'll jump in and then Mark wants to jump in. We do budget in for general repairs and maintenance every year. And with the renovation, I expect numerous efficiencies to come. But I know Mark does.
Yeah, and do you want me to pull up that page?
Sure.
All right, so directly answering that, and sorry, the scroll bar on this computer is a little bit different from what I'm used to. I have to go through all these manually. So PMA actually did an analysis of that to answer your question. The bottom line is that right now, when PMA reviewed the finances, you're basically spending around $80,000 on general maintenance a year. It's a rough number, right? It's sometimes more, sometimes less. It's an assumption that moving forward, after you do this renovation project, and I should show you where the switch happens. It's one of the highlights here. You can see right here, building costs. Building costs include utility costs. Building costs include utilities, anything that's related to the building that you guys have in operating your building. But it also includes some of the maintenance. Of this $238,000 that you're spending this year, for instance, in the projected actual, roughly, $80,000, a little bit over that, is your maintenance costs that you're asking about. Why it goes down in this year of the renovation is because by roughly half, you can see there's a $40,000 dip. Is that we're assuming about half of that annual maintenance cost that you are paying right now goes away. And it would start escalating from that reduction going forward. So that is in your operating budget, and then the special reserve would handle the things that might be 10, 15 years out from now, which, in that summary from PMA on page 5 might have been year 6. I think they call out the different levels that at the end of the 20 years, if you didn't go and have any major expenses, you'd have roughly, I think it was just under $500,000 in that at the rehab, 441,000. So you'd have between the operating to handle kind of the average annual stuff, and then you also have this to handle any long range stuff.
Okay.
It's a very good question though, and it's something that really, so library district you want to focus on because you want to make sure you're healthy. That's what I think PMA did a good job of making sure that they didn't cut that down too much.
Well, now that you bring that up, Mark, the other in the financial projection models that you just on page 51, would you tie in the there are a couple other colored boxes. I wasn't quite sure why they were highlighted. Possibly we've covered that already.
Hopefully I'm not giving anyone any seizures with this moving. I do it and it's quick. I apologize for that on the screen that you're seeing. All right, so.
Well, I mean, so we just covered what you explained to me as far as the maintenance cost, the building cost, and how that's built in. On page 54, we've got the renovation under expenditures. I just want to know why they're highlighted. Is that something? And then you what appears to me to be a green box under the other financing sources. We have the bond proceeds of $1 million.
Right. So this is this is the cash flow analysis that was asked for to be included in the financial advisors RFP a while back. So what this is showing is that in fiscal year ending June of 2022, so next year, June, you would have received the bond proceeds. And this model, option 1A, is the $1 million worth of borrowing option.
Okay,
You would also expend, 3.9 from here in this fiscal year. But since I mentioned you'd start roughly, don't hold me to it right now, because we don't know what your schedule is going to be yet. But if you started construction, say January of 2022, you're going to take that through another 10, 12 months. Well, that's why your fiscal year 22, 23 also includes $1 million worth of expenditures, because anything after June would have to be covered in the next fiscal year.
okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Treasurer Norton.
Just a thank you, because I would make a longer thank you, but we definitely want to save time where we can. But thank you, Mark. Thank you. I'm glad we're having this meeting. Pivoting off of what we were talking about just a little bit ago in Marjorie's last question, when we were on the page with the special reserve, what gets funded in the special reserve at the end of, by the end of the 20 years, we could, give everyone the eye flash thing again.
Yeah,
it doesn't hurt, Mark.
almost up there.
Thank you. Yeah. So I just want to make sure I understand. I think I do, but then good to make sure everyone else also understands, even if I do understand that, because it says it in the footnote too, right? It's saying like, okay, capital projects, so things not contemplated in the operating budget that would be covered in operating costs, maintenance costs, et cetera, would be covered by special reserves. And at the end of the 20 years, what builds up from the annual average surplus is in option 1A, for example, $434,000, correct? And that is what's available for capital expenditures. And what I want to check on is something like, so let's say we do option 1A, we get to the end of 20 years, and we'd said that you mentioned that FQC had about $500,000 of at the 20-year mark. This is what you'd be, looking to have to spend. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm wondering is, does that change at all with this renovation? Does that help us that anything is covered that would have been in that outlook? Or is there anything that we did, like say air handlers that we just did, that then hits its 20-year, like a year after the end of this 20 years? And then the air handlers were not cheap. So I'm just saying, is this fully contemplated on either end of like what happens at year 21? Do we have things that just, would just repeat that were pretty large, like what we paid for in the past couple of years? Or are there the opposite things that benefit us because we accomplished them in what's in scope for this capital project? So
there are, I'll start out with the things that you would accomplish. What we're assuming, because you're doing so much work, is that your windows, in talking to Director Weinstein, you do have some issues and things like that in certain areas. So part of the facility condition assessment is that you wanted to replace the windows and things. You hear that or not? Does everyone hear like a feedback?
If you could all mute while Mark's speaking, that'd be great. Thank you.
In that program, this is going out from memory. I know the windows were supposed to be replaced, I think, 15 years or 20 years. Those are included in this 7.7, so you wouldn't have that expense. I think that's one of your questions there, Jenny. The other thing is, things that would happen at 21 years or 22 years. I'll be honest, those are not calculated in here. It's beyond that 20-year range because they just went to the debt. What I will say is that you're going to, what we typically see happen is that at the end of a project, you'll go through and you'll have analysis, or you'll have some record of all the maintenance documentations of all the equipment, right? And you'll have a plan then made for the next 15, 20 years done at that point. And you'll start projecting all of that with the actual equipment, because we don't know what the equipment is right now or how it's going to work.
In 5 minutes, the library will be closed and the computer shut down. Please be sure to check out our materials before leaving the building.
The other thing that plays into it is that this model, and one of the funny things that I thought, I don't know if it was Andrew or yeah, who said it, but this is a model and we know that the numbers are not going to be accurate because we don't know what CPI is going to be. We don't know if you're going to need to take CPI every year. So, this is all a projection, assuming just a flat line of CPI at what, 1.5, 1.65%. We've known it's been a lot higher than that times and a lot lower. So you could potentially, this 441 could be overly conservative. I don't know. But that's really what you would do another analysis, say in 5 years or in 10 years, to see what's going on with your finances, to then make adjustments to expenditures at that point and realign things. Typically, it's so far out right now, you really can't go out more than 20 years and get a realistic idea on that. I think anyone who told you that you can get out more than 20 years and tell you what the maintenance costs are going to be, that's a big stretch. I don't know if I trust it too much. We could throw darts at it and build out something, but I'd have a tough time saying it was more than darts.
I mean, yeah, I want to agree with everything you just said. I just know, again, my personal experience is not identical to this scenario, but the job I worked at for almost a decade, we were responsible for the accounting for power plant operations. So there were major maintenance items that were cyclical, that either through contract or through just known useful life of certain components and things, you knew what was going to be in the 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, and not exactly like clockwork, but just to make sure that the facility was maintained properly, you could project that out into perpetuity because you knew if it didn't have to be done in 1 year, it would probably have to be done to the next. You might squeak by a year or two, no different than a roof. It's like, a roof has an approximation and you can squeak it 1 year back, 3 years forward if you're lucky with the weather. But generally you can, within a 5-year range, still kind of know when your big ticket items are going to repeat. And so my only concern here, sort of the call of the question is that 434 solid enough for the next few years right after that? If we're only able to increase that reserve with the current strategy $20,000 a year, then that's, if we've got several $100,000 of things that we could have foreseen because they are repeatable on a certain general cycle. I just wish we could get a little bit better view of the horizon to make sure that we're not leaving that reserve estimate clearly a bit I'm looking for a word, like just not strong side, on the weak side.
So, yeah, that's a good point. We could ask Steph, maybe Tatiana or Beth would be able to weigh in a little bit, but that's an $80,000 number that's used annually. I think that is what does cover the known cyclical cycle of 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year type stuff.
Yeah, we're not talking capital projects. Right. To keep us up and running, that 80,000 is everything from IT work to curbside, but like curb work.
Yeah, pavement stuff. Yeah.
Like that.
So that would be in the operating budget, yeah, which projected there. If that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Answer it, I guess.
Yeah, and it's the idea that if that if a portion of that 80,000 didn't need to be done that year, that excess cash flow can move into the reserve, and then we'd see that go up that way.
It could. It would be an operational reserve. If you didn't utilize all 80,000, it would remain in operational reserve. And then the board could decide at the end of the year whether they want to transfer more from if there was surplus.
Any other questions or comments?
I probably do, but I want to let someone else take a turn. That was one big one. I've got several other questions, and I'm cherry picking because as the conversation evolves, some of what I'm curious about gets answered, and then some other things stick out as things I want to talk about more. So let me let someone else take a spin. Secretary Swiss stack, so I could pay her back for when she called me out for being overdue for comment.
Okay, Secretary Swiss stack.
I actually don't have any questions at the moment, but I did want to thank Mark for all the hard work he put into the presentation tonight. I really appreciate the thoroughness of the report that you provided, and the details in your presentation. It really helped me to understand more where everything was coming from, that whole idea that we talked about before, where some of the trustees were talking about sticker shock and things like that. And I think that really helped me to see kind of how everything fits together, and really helps me understand better, okay, yeah, that's why it's this amount of money, because all of the different parts that fit into it. So I appreciate that. And I just want to say thank you.
What we're here to do. So watch your backs.
Any
Okay.
other-
I'm
Vice President Bartelli.
gonna go out on a limb here, and it's probably not going to be well received. I have to ask the question. And I realize we've only heard from our detractors, so to speak. I'll just say it. Is there a possibility that we could see a design that could accomplish the 4 or 5 major items that we wanted to address from all of our resident feedback, and having the friends in and the women's club and so on and so forth, their suggestions within the amount of what we have in our reserve now? I believe that's close to $6.5 million without going into debt. Question. I don't know how far into things Sheehan is in. You know, we're incurring costs all along for this project. I will say this, I don't want anyone to think that I feel pressured by 3 or 4 people who appear at our meetings. I welcome their input, but it might not, you know, it's a question to ask. I just want to get the feelings of the other board members and see where they're at on this.
I'm interested. I don't, you're not alone there. I'll agree with everything you said, including that, you know, the recent feedback certainly does add to the conversation, you know, because that is what we should be focused on, is feedback from the public, you know, and so not just the most recent, but obviously the community engagement survey and everything else along the way. I'm not making any one more important than the other, but yes, I think that, you know, even in our RFQ, we set out an estimate project budget of 5 to 10 million. We haven't seen anything on the 5 side. We've seen now as low as 7.7, and I think that we've all learned through this process that the amount of debt issuance that we can sustain without making our finances uncomfortable is not as high as we had thought, and President Hummel was asking questions related to that earlier this evening. So I think it does behoove us, at least from my perspective, for us to see, you know, take an option down another notch to see what, without financing, would be our best, good, better, best kind of sketch. So I agree with you, Marjorie. I think it's worth it.
Only thing I'll let the board discussion continue, but only thing I will say is that the design team was contracted in by that project parameters page that was approved, and that gave them an $8.5 to $9 million range in there. So that's what they were tasked with doing. So if there was another, you know, they've really tasked with doing 2 options. 8.5 to 9 million was the range. I would anticipate it would be another service round to go and do another option. I'll put that out there. Not that you can't do it, because you can do it. Like I said, not that I want to advocate one way or the other, but you don't want to get, yeah.
Could you define service round, Mark? You lost me on that vocabulary.
Yeah, every time you're asking them to do more, I would honestly say that they've done more than what they were contracted to doing, because we keep on dropping this down further and further and further.
Okay, then maybe could we approach it a different way? Could we say what the current 7.7 North Main Entry renovation is, which you have detailed out, and I think Trustee Duffy said it well in terms of, hey, I love details too, but there's a lot more details than I'm ready to digest this evening, even looking at it in advance. But that's fine because it's there when we're ready for it. So thank you for putting all that time into it. But can we see, and I'm sorry, it's just sort of like, as we're getting into the finer, what is going to be the intersection of what we're comfortable investing and all of the projects that we were really feeling were most important to accomplish, to get that eclipse of the right midpoint there for both of those things. Within those amounts, can you highlight which portions of those items could be done in a later phase, as an example? And we know FFE could be, or some or most of it could be done separately because, but I don't know if at an additional cost, you know what I mean? Certain things, it might be obvious that they are structural and it's do it now while you're opening up the walls. And so that's got to be bundled into this, but which things we might be able to segregate and consider possibly for a down the road additional improvement project.
Well, I think we would really need clear direction on what needs to be included and what doesn't. Because looking at this, I had a strong hand in helping our internal cost team try to get this driven down as much as possibly they could do to be comfortable for a budget number, right? There's a whole other level of negotiation once you get to a contractor way down the line. But looking at this, I didn't see quickly, at least, anything that you could pull out at this point, just easily just say, okay, and I'm not going to do this piece and pull it out. Because even your FF&E, if you're not going to do some of your FF&E, maybe there's a handful of things like you're saying that you do later or whatever. You're talking about.
I'll just make up a hypothetical if that helps. Entrance. You know what I mean? If that wasn't oh, sorry.
No, why don't we let Mark
No,
answer the next question and then we'll jump in.
It's not, where I was going to finish, and I'll listen to what your suggestion was, but you would be looking at, if you were to do this renovation plan, right, which I'm assuming that everyone knows that if you went down to it, 6.8 or whatever that option would be, you wouldn't have this plan. You wouldn't be able to move the walls that you're looking at moving or do the site work that you're looking at doing, moving the entrance. That's really what drives it. But it kind of goes hand in hand. The FF&E cost is driven because you're rearranging rooms and things like that. You need to replace them anyways. So that you could look at doing that, but it'd be a whole nother design exercise and really starting from, not starting from scratch. You have a lot of information built into this, but there'd be a whole nother way of thinking of it because we would not be able to touch the whole building like this has. I'm not sure, I don't have a quick answer, but what was your suggestion? Sorry, I didn't want to hear that.
So Treasurer, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I apologize for interrupting. I was hoping to help, not harm. But my just off the cuff was what about segregating entrance? Because we already have an entrance, and that's not youth services, that's not adult service, that's not the reconfiguration of staff spaces and others, other things that were big ticket items that we know were top of the list. I don't remember our engagement survey saying, we need a new entrance. So if we carved that out, what does that leave?
So yeah, I think, okay, so if you want to say, let's not do a new entrance, let's just leave the entrance where it is and move on from there. You're not going to get that staff up at front with the security and everything else, right? Because you have this corridor right now that has to be maintained for egress. So we really don't have room, even that someone have to go and do a look. It's not me, it's a designer. We have to go and do a look at the code requirements for how wide that needs to be for it to be maintained as an egress, and can you put a surface desk and all that in there? But right now, so you wouldn't have your service desk there. Beyond that, you would still be looking at if you wanted to right size your youth department, if that was then the priority, you would still be looking at moving youth down somewhere in the lower level and moving it, splitting adult between the upper floor and the lower floor. And then it'd be an operational question for the board. Do you, right now, when you walk in the entry, you don't have to go through adult to get up to youth. You have to go upstairs, and there's no restrooms up there, but you don't have to go through adult. If you did split adult between 2 levels, I don't know how it would work out. Obviously, it's a whole other design exercise, but theoretically, you'd be walking through the entry, then down the stairs, and through part of adult to get to youth. The way that it's currently laid out today, I don't know, it could be different. But so if the priority is to get youth right sized, is that type of operational issue for the long-term good, or is that not good? It's a question for the board to consider. I'd let you guys weigh in there. But that type of stuff would have to be worked through, which will really, that's going to take time, time to do. I really don't have the answers on the cuff right now to get down there, but you're definitely at that level. You're right, Jody. You're not getting the new entrances. I can very confidently say that now. You wouldn't be able to move your entrance at that level. So then, what are your options for youth? Because we know leaving it up there, at least as far as I've heard, and you guys can tell us all differently, but leaving it up there wasn't an option because it's already too small. And to leave it up there, you'd have to add a restroom, which would make it even smaller than it already is too small. And the whole $7.7 million project cost relied on the wing that we're sitting in right now, this meeting room area. The wall's not really changing, not having to move a lot of the structure that goes in here. Yeah, it's going to be upgraded, right? You get wall finishes, you get the floor finishes, all the facelift right here. But if you're going to move services down here, like a service desk to this entry point, then you're probably going to have to rearrange this meeting room, which is still just going to drive costs back up. So it'd be that's where the time is to figure out, okay, what can be done, what can't be done. Really, I don't have a straightforward answer for you today, if that makes sense.
I mean, that's okay. That's helpful. It's not, it's not a magic bullet, but it's helpful. Is there anything else? Because I just threw entrance out there. Is there any way to say, do a drive-up window later? Is that an isolated enough thing to carve out? Or is that something that needs to be part of the greater construction scope as is, because it will be cost efficient to do so, or other reasons? Like it would, the rest of the flow would have to rearrange, like we're talking with entrance.
I think that's a valid question. I think all these are valid questions, so keep them coming. Because you guys are thinking even probably clearer than me at times. The drive-up window I would not think makes sense, because I don't think you're adding enough cost, because the current renovation plan takes advantage of the fact that the circulation services location stays the same. So you basically just pop a window outside the wall and then take the curb cut as you're going down that little hill and move it over a few feet so someone can actually drive up next to that drive-through window. So I don't think there's enough bang for the buck to do it later versus now. You could do that, but you might be saving, you're not getting down 6 figures, let's put it that way.
No, I think in your cost estimate, it looked like 300,000, or maybe I'm thinking of another page. I don't remember, but, oh no, that might've been entrances. Sorry, I'm just erase what I said.
Okay.
If you did a north entry and kept the east entry, then do a south entry.
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I was asking if they put in a north entry still, but just keep this east entry and don't do a south entry. Would that be any type of savings or not? Really?
You would have significant savings doing that, yes, because theoretically, again, this is shooting off the hip now, but you can talk about it. You wouldn't have the elevator cost, right? You use the elevator that's existing. But the question would be, really the question would be the service point and how important that is to the board and staff, because you still wouldn't get the service point here. So if someone to come in for security or whatever else, they're walking here, and even when they get to what's now your service point, they'd have to, using the current plans, it's in my mind, they'd have to go through the adult section to get to a desk. So if someone's in the building, there's no service sight line or security sight line to that. Again, if it's a discussion to be had with the board, it can be had. I'm just not sure how that aligns with the value there of the security set line. But that type of move would get you down lower in costs, just like what the knock-on effect of it is. So all of a sudden you start looking at, okay, what does this impact? How does it work the flow? And really you're looking at a new floor plan at that point.
So any thoughts, questions, or comments? Either questions or comments, thoughts from anybody else? Right, oh, Trustee Duffy, are you raising your hand? Yeah, Trustee Duffy, we haven't heard from him, so I'll go him and then Marge, I'll go next with you. So Trustee Duffy?
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm kind of struggling a little bit, partly from exactly how to handle the meeting. But when I look at this, I mean, I know I've asked this question a few times over the last year and a half, which was, how much did we want to spend? And we weren't ever prepared to answer that question. And now, even though we knew how much I'm going to call it the maintenance projects were going to cost no matter what. So I come from a different perspective, and I do appreciate, Vice President Bartelli, you asking this question. You have to invest in your community, and the families are also taxpayers who aren't getting the services that they want. They are stuck with a small youth services center and blind spots and no family restrooms and have to go up the stairs. We can go down the list, right? And I agree. I appreciate the feedback that we get at these meetings, but it's just part of it. I go with the data that we got from the community survey, the people that I, of course, talk to. I know we all talk to people. That's just anecdotal information. It's not scientific. But, I mean, I'm fine seeing different options. I think it's good to look at it, but I think that this is something that we've had countless hours discussing this. And we keep chipping away at it. So what you get is you're going to get some stuff met, and then we're going to be doing a community needs assessment 15 years down the road, and we're going to find out that the same issues are prevalent. And then, the point of being on a board is to make some of these decisions. So I know that's a little bit of a soapbox, and I apologize, probably because it's 9:18 and Mark flooded my brain with numbers at this point. So it's, but I take a different approach on it. I do think this is the 7.7 or 8 is very fiscally responsible and meets a lot of the stuff that we want. So I think I've been pretty clear from the last meeting into this meeting.
I think I'll just jump in quick. I think I don't want to speak for everybody. I don't think anybody's got a problem with the price so much. I think it goes back to the sticker shock some people had at the last meeting. So I think that's where it's kind of like if it was 8 million or even a little bit more, and maybe it was what I think people might have had expected you could get for 8 million. I think that might have, that would have. So I think it's just the sticker shock, just to go back to it. So now it's like, trying to justify the cost. So, but I mean, your points are well taken too. I think everybody's on the same page with that. It's just, it's just kind of it goes back to the sticker shock. I think that's where people are at. So, and I think Mark mentioned it earlier. I mean, I know this sometimes can be painstaking. I mean, it's good to do these questions now, not later. And maybe we did get a little bit too much detail tonight, but I mean, but that's, yeah, because there's a learning curve there too. But yeah, so I know Vice President Bartelli, I think you had a question or a comment. Yeah, you can go now.
Well, the main purpose of me asking that question was to get some response from my board members. We, in the last couple meetings, myself included, we have been very silent. And because of OMA, you know, we don't have a chance to really get the true feelings of our board members. That is my feeling. Could be wrong. And I understand what Tom Duffy said. Yeah, we've spent a lot of hours on this, and we've talked about the numbers. But by the same token, it never hurts to come from the other side. And that was my intent. I am not opposed to spending this money. I really think we need a renovation. It's time. First time I ran because I felt the previous boards did not act. They were putting away the money and not spending it, saving it for a rainy day. And I do believe the rainy day is here. But, I hope my fellow board members understand why I asked the question. We haven't heard from Liz. We haven't heard from Emily in regards to my comment. I'd like to hear. We don't have to be negative, but this is my only opportunity. And I'd also like to thank Mark for all the hard work, all of this information we asked for, and I really appreciate it. I'll refer again to the sticker shock. It's probably, taken over me, but I just want to really have all of us understand, and we should by now. I'm not saying we didn't understand, but we really have to come together and tell each other how we feel, and if we're going to go forward with this, we can't keep having special meetings and not deciding anything. So I'll be part of that process. I will make the decision along with all of you, but that was my whole point. So I hope you understand that. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else any questions, comments, thoughts? Any of the other trustees?
Well, since Marjorie called me out, I'll speak first, and then I expect Liz to go after me. I just, I wanted to say, I feel like this has kind of been a long time coming. In the past 4 years that I've been on the board, we went through the strategic planning process. A lot of these things that were on that checklist that Mark went through earlier were things that came out of our strategic planning process. And I don't want to lose sight of that. I know that, the board has changed since then. But I really feel like there are certain things that like Tom Duffy said, we need to be doing for the betterment of the community. And people that I've talked with as well, just about the idea about youth services and it being a larger space, and having a teen space where they can go and hang out, and those kinds of things, and family restrooms. Those are all things that I think are really important, and I think that to continue growing with the community and being an integral part of the community, I think these are things that we need to do to help bring the library into that. We talked about it before, that 21st century library type vision, to help keep it being a community center and where people want to go. And so I don't want to see any of this stuff that we've talked about that are on our checklist. I don't want to see any of them going away. I want to see this move forward. So that's where I'm coming from. Now I'm going to pass it to Liz.
Steve Sullivan.
I have to?
Sure.
Okay. I can't agree more with Emily and with Tom Duffy. I think that we have been discussing this for a very long time. I think that it actually, in my opinion, doesn't have enough of what I'd like to see. I think we need to decide on what we're going to do going forward, and then we need to do our next round of strategic planning and contingency planning. For example, what happens if St. Joan decides, I'm not going to let the library, I mean, St. John's is a wonderful partner, don't get me wrong. What if they should decide, I'm not going to let the library use my parking as overflow parking? I mean, we need as a board to say, what are our contingency plans for all these situations? And how am I going to, get past what we've got to do for today and look at what would we do if that situation arose? I mean, we need to have those other plans in place. And we spend any longer on making these types of decisions and something else comes up, we won't be ready for it. I also think we need to be anticipating what's the technology going to be 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road. It's kind of like what we're already planning for is not the newest, the best, the greatest technology. We're just trying to play catch up. I mean, there's a lot more that I would like to see in the library. So I frankly could not see us taking anything away because I don't think that we have enough in there we're going to be providing already because we've skinnied it down. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to see, and I actually had a constituent take me over to Naperville by their civic center where they have an outdoor Wi-Fi seating area. I mean, to me, the perfect place to have it is at the library. And that's not in our budget. It's not in our things that we're addressing. And if we are going to increase every year by the CPI, I mean, for 20 years, I don't see us affording that. And you know what? COVID happened now. It could happen, COVID, whatever, the next COVID. So I can't see us taking anything else out of this design. And I have a whole nother list of things that I'd like to see us accomplish. So my vote is we make a decision as to what's going to be in this. We don't take anything out. We go forward and we do some strategic planning so that we don't find ourselves behind again. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. Dr. White. I saw
Just wanted you to keep your voice up.
Okay. Any other trustees?
I mean, if I can pop in one more comment, because Liz got me fired. We often hear that the refrain of, decreasing library card use or people not coming here. And, part of that is just the space. I mean, I can give you a long list of families that want to spend a couple hours at a library, but can't do it at the Lisle one because it's very small. And so you go someplace else. So these are our taxpayers that are leaving our library district to go someplace else because we are not providing the services of space for them. Now, I know I have a slanted point of view because as someone has a 5-year-old, I need any space I can get to get them out of the house, right? But those are also we want to be attracting those people to our community too. Those are the ones that buy their homes, the ones that upkeep it, all those great things. And that is something I keep in mind because it's not just what we're doing now, but how does this play 10, 15, 20 years from now? How does this make us a competitive community to draw in more people? amenities do matter to new families or people coming out here. And I think that is something I've kept in mind as we've gone through all of these discussions, is what would I want to be looking for when I come to our community if I want to choose between different places to live. So Marjorie, I think you got your wish of getting everyone's opinion out. So that's good.
Anyone else? And I think with Vice President Bartelli, I mean, and even Treasurer Norton, and maybe even to a lesser extent myself, I don't think we're taking away from anything, like I would call it a core service as far as like expanding youth services or anything. It was just more, even like a question of an entrance. I mean, yeah, it's maybe nice to have, but if we had help drive costs down and get us what we need, maybe, but, my only major questions coming in this were a couple of the financial things like the tax levy, but I mean, they also been handled at a different time too. But any other questions or comments?
Oh, I guess I'll just ask, what happens on our next regular meeting? What are we hoping to accomplish at the next step of the regular meeting? Assuming we accomplished what we intended to accomplish at this one.
I was just going to ask Director Weinstein and Mark if you guys wanted to chime in on that.
So I think trying to make sure I captured what I heard correctly. And I think we've heard a few different questions, and I know I've heard it from at least half of the board, a very strong inclination that let's move forward with a project. Is that what, I guess, I'll ask this, what is our task to give to you to make sure that you can make a decision? Should we bundle a 7.7 or is there more that's needed? And I don't want to put you in a position where you're making decisions the next meeting that we see you with things still hanging out there. And I don't want to put you in that position. I want to make sure you have what you need. And the goal of this meeting was really to provide the clarity to, okay, we heard about the sticker shock. Let's answer that. Let's answer these financial questions and get through that. Is that what you needed to then allow us to package this information for you to make a decision? Or is there anything else that you haven't heard that you need?
And I think going back to Mark's checklist, I think that was key in the introductory pages, because I think the board really wanted to hear, what are we getting for 8 million? And that was before. And now we're seeing kind of a whittled back to 7.7 and seeing what we get for 7.7. And I think what I'm understanding is CCS would like to know, is there a consensus with this list? Am I right?
Yeah, well, yeah, are we to package up this at 7.7 for?
And can you explain, package it up?
Yeah, and so what that package would include is the drawings, and we've asked Sheehan Eagle Hartree with the $7.7 million sticker to put together some entry images so you can see what that entry would look like, the north and south entries. So we'd have that. We'd have
fleshed out sketches, correct? So the board can see something more come to life than just some squares on a page.
Yeah, and keep in mind, yeah, it's exactly that. And keep in mind that any of these designs for like what it might be sketched as, that is just an idea and an option, right? Because we're so early in this. You have, like I said, maybe that's 6 plus or minus months of design to tweak that. So it's really just give you an idea. It's not saying, okay, what you see in that entry 3D image is what you're going to build. No, it's you'll have, hey, I'm changing that. But it's basically giving you an idea of, okay, yeah, this is what it could be. So you have the drawings, but really most importantly in those drawings is the location of spaces correct? In other words, is it correct that we need to move youth services down and put it next to a main entry so that people can walk in at that level? Is it correct to put the north and south entries the way it's drawn in that renovation option? That's the high level that we want to take away from the drawings. The second thing, part of that packet, would be the financial analysis, and that would be off the 7.7 million option. And we could still leave in the option 1A and option 1B, I think it was called, where it was either way. That's fine to do for now and continue along this process. And the next step, they're not going to be issuing bonds now for any debt issuance. It'd be later on. The third part would be, and I think this is, at least to me, it's always the most important, is what is the cost and what is the project pro forma behind that cost? I want the board to be comfortable that yes, it's a $7.7 million project you're considering. That's what we're going to ask the designers to do the full design with, because they're at that point, if that's approved to move forward, they would bring on other consultants, the structural engineers, mechanical engineers, all of that consultant package they bring on and they start designing with. We don't want to, at that point, say, okay, yeah, go on 7.7 and then get halfway through and have to change courses and go back to 6.8 because the board wasn't comfortable with that number. So we really want to be sure before we get down that line, that path, and approve a contract to go forward with any consultants that you're heading in the right direction. That's really the crux of it. It's those three pieces. It's financing, budget, and in a general sense, is this kind of outline the shell of a project? Is that what we want the designers to go fill in?
And I think what you mentioned about kind of the main points of where things go, like youth services on the first floor, or having a drive-up window, or a front street entrance. And it was suggested that, maybe you don't do one of those pieces now. Just in being in conversation with the architects and CCS and trying to bring this project below the 8.5, in all of those conversations and all of those meetings, any change you make, it's like a domino effect. So, if you say we're not going to do the second level, or we're not going to add a bathroom here, it affects every other space nearby. And so, as Mark mentioned before, if there was something we would take out, it would necessitate a new design, basically.
Right. So it's really getting the pieces right. The high level, the checklist, the project cost. We want to make sure that the project cost is right. All the numbers that built up, the number garbage I gave you today, those numbers we can swing those around within that. But what we're going to do is we understand that entities like yourselves, if there's a number, it has to come in at that number. There's no more than that. So it's not like we have to design and keep everyone on track to that number once it's approved to move forward with. That's really what we're looking for at this point.
So what does the board want to do? Treasurer Norton?
I know, I'm sorry to be difficult, but the first thing I want to say is, I don't know if this is called a decision, but I don't think I was preparing for the scope of this meeting to include any decision. It was more of like clarifications and helping us get more on the same page and starting to figure out where to go next. I think we've made progress on that. But another thing that's, hitting us right now is, I think it was mentioned in public comment that, if it wasn't mentioned by a board member, sorry, I don't remember who said it, but mentioned that, we are going to have some board changes in the foreseeable future. And, whatever, we're talking about now, that sounds kind of like a decision. I'm a little, hesitant to do anything that's going to set us on a trajectory with Karen Larson absent, first of all, and then 2 other potential changes to the board coming. So can someone explain to me if we're making something close enough to a decision that with 3 different board members a few months from now, we wouldn't want them to have had input?
So I can speak to 2 board members leaving, and I sent the board kind of a schedule of what would happen for like an appointment schedule. And I think it projected out to July and having an appointment. So it would delay the process at least until July. And then any new trustee would have to be oriented, onboarded, a lot of background in terms of, unless they were following along the whole way, there would be a lot of history to digest. That helps.
It's up to 60 days, so it'd be up to July. It could be done in June too, as far as appointment.
Well, I was trying to be,
I get it. Treasurer Norris, was that?
That was what I
Okay.
had off the top of my head right now. And just in general, if my discomfort level was a 7 out of 10 at the last meeting, maybe it's a 5 now. I mean, it's not a 1 or a 2. It's come down somewhat, but I don't have a warm and fuzzy.
Well, let me ask, I mean, if we didn't have this special board meeting, will we be having this question in 2 weeks or how would that?
In terms of,
Like this, are we okay with this 0.7 million number?
yeah, so I might take after the last board meeting, I know it wasn't, it was vocalized by the majority that, who spoke at that meeting, that it seemed like we should package the 8 million. So that after that board meeting, we thought, okay, we're going to start packaging the 8 million, at least for a final package for formal board consideration. After the feedback and discussion since then with staff and individual board members with staff, it was a general consensus that no, we needed to take a look at the 2020 tax levy year. So now we're at 7.7. And so really it was, okay, we came down from, we thought we were doing 8 as a package. Now we think we're doing 7.7, but is that accurate? And if it's not accurate, then what would you want us to do?
because the question is what we're going to ask she and Nagel to present a more fleshed out drawing, and they can't do that without a general understanding of the project cost, correct?
Right, and I honestly don't know that they can do anything with the exterior if we're really going under 7.7. You know, I'm just saying that, and that there can't be a project under 7.7. I'm not saying that much, but the exterior and those changes that we've stripped this down to as conservative as it can be, or fiscally conservative, I should say, as it can be to get what was on the list. If there's things that are taken off the list, saying, okay, if there's a board consensus, take this thing off the list, take that thing off the list, then we can do that. But that's really starting over what had been done last September, August-ish of last year, which would cause another design iteration with Nick. We need to give them clear direction if it needs to be something other than 7.7. I guess that's a simple way. Maybe I'll explain it that way. If you need to see something other than 7.7, we need clear direction on what to give them. We gave them clear direction with that parameters list. You know, that's what this page was, preliminary project parameters. And then it turned into, in subsequent board meetings, all this key project adds. We need to be able to tell them, okay, and we'd have to ask them, okay, what is it going to take to do another round, and how do we get there? What does the number need to be?
Yeah. So Trustee Sullivan, I think, yeah.
Yes. Could I just ask, first of all, Mark, I love your info. I love the detail, but I guess I'm kind of a nerd that way. Secondly, can you tell me the main difference between the 7.7? Is it just the entrance and the vestibule between the 7.7 and the 8?
Yes, you are correct. And I can show that this is the same plan that was viewed publicly last month. This is the same board packet. See this vestibule right here?
Yep.
That's on the lower level. There's a similar vestibule on the upper level on the south side. That is shown as an addition. This space theoretically would be moved inside the building, so your lobby would get smaller in the 7.7 version. And then the second floor, same thing. This is, I'm hoping it can get the computer to work with me. Yep. See how this vestibule is built outside of the existing second floor? That would move in. The knock-on effect of even doing that, we really struggled with, is because you have a structural line. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but you have a structural line. So by moving all of this in, the vestibule is going to get shrunk, or the stairs, and all those types of decisions really impact things. We think we can get it done at the 7.7 million level within the building constraints. That is the main difference.
Is it going to look like really goofy? I mean, is it going to look like really ridiculous? I don't want a building that's going to like look ridiculous and people are going to say, what were they thinking?
I think that's what we've tested designers with. And I'm definitely not the designer. So hopefully, if we're going down to 7.7, because right, it takes time and money to get them to do these drawings and sketches and that. So if you want to see, if the board is not comfortable with a $7.7 million project, it needs to be lower. We're not going to have them spend the time and your money at the end of the day to go and develop those sketches because it's not realistic. But if the board is comfortable seeing 7.7, we'll have them do those drawings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, is the 7.7 even pushing it to where it's not going to look right?
I think you can do enough. It's not going to look like a big Taj Mahal. Let's put it that way. It's not going to be some of the big fancy new library buildings that you see in different areas. But I don't believe that is my perception from your discussions, right? So it could be off base, and you guys are free to tell me so. But I don't think that you're after big and shiny. You're after practical. And I think that you could get a practical solution that looks like a library, but doesn't spend a bunch of money on a shiny new object.
And Tatiana, can you live with 7.7?
Well, I mean, my goal was to get the project below 8.5. And as I mentioned, I worked with CCS and the architects in many meetings to try to get it down to 8. And then Mark and I worked very hard on trying to even, because we were working off the 2020 extension, we had to try to save costs somewhere. And the vestibules were where we could do that without affecting some major service points. And I have confidence, and I know Mark and I discussed this, that the 7.7 would be a practical and aesthetically pleasing solution.
Okay.
If I just jump in, now is it 300, is it for both the North and South Festival or just the North one?
No, both would have to be inside the building.
I'll just go down the row. Secretary Swistak.
So I'm kind of echoing what Liz was saying, that I have a little bit of concerns with what she was just talking about, or what Mark just showed us about the south entry vestibule, if it got pushed inside, what that would look like on the second floor. That definitely concerns me. I'm really pleased with getting down to the 8. I am concerned about what would happen to the floor plans if we were to take away those outer vestibules and push them inside the building. And I understand what Treasurer Norton was saying about the fact that potentially, we're definitely going to have 1 new board member, potentially 2, when all is said and done. And if that's not until July, and then the onboarding and explaining everything, that just really sets this whole project back a long time. And I feel like this current board has put so much work into it that I feel like we need to see it through, while we're still on the board together. I feel like we've been involved, and we've been doing the work, and I just think it needs to keep moving forward. I don't want to see it put on hold for 3-4 months and not do anything. I think we need to move forward.
Now, are you okay with 7.7?
I would prefer not to be pushing the vestibules inside. So I believe Mark at one point, did you, I can't remember now, Mark, I'm sorry. We're going on 3 hours here almost. So if you had said that we could, look at both 7.7 and 8, or if we needed to just pick one, I can't, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I think what we could do is, because we know what the big move was between those two, right? That was kind of the big thing that we had to scrap out. We could, the board was comfortable, look at vestibule options as an alternate. I don't know, and then maybe make a final decision on what the vestibules need to be in, schematic design, which would be the next phase of design, and you get a little bit more detail there, and that might help a little bit.
But for this next iteration, would they see the 7.7?
But I think we'd see that 7.7 exactly, and then hold that as an ad alternate, and, you can see where things go. But that's even tough. I'm thinking it through as a designer. It's tough because it's going to mess with structure and everything else as soon as you move things in and out. I think it can be done. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult under designers, which we can push them on and try to work with them. I know the good thing is you guys have a good team, and you can see how they work with you to get numbers down. They seem to be wanting to work. It's just that they need some direction going forward. So if we can say, hey, our project cost is 7.7 right now, carry exterior vestibule as an ad alternate, we'll consider it one more time before moving on into after schematic. That's something that would be fair, I would think. I'd like to discuss that with them. And obviously, you're not making a decision on a project today. So that's something I can have a discussion with them on, as Director Weinstein and I can, ahead of the next board meeting, and really clarify what that would, what knock-on effects that I'm not thinking about to that request 3 hours into a board meeting. Oh, sure.
Okay, thank you. I just, it's just a tough, situation that we find ourselves in right now. So,
tonight, I do think you need to make a decision tonight. Let me, make it simple. I don't think you need to make a decision tonight between 7.7 and 8. That can kind of come as we go through package. I would like the package of one. And, if you're trying to be more fiscally conservative, I can package the 7.7. And if, it needs to adapt from there, then we can adapt from there.
Okay, so would you recommend then, packaging the 7.7, and then, as things go on, then we can say, okay, if we feel comfortable, then we could add on some additional stuff, but it's better to start at the lower end and then add on, as opposed to saying, okay, no, we need to cut back.
Yes, 100%. It's been, I know, it's always more difficult to cut out than add in.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, did you say it's harder to cut back than add in?
Yes, it is harder to cut things out to meet a number, just add them.
Thank you.
Vice President Bartelli.
I'm good with the packaging, but I don't have any objection to going to the 8. I agree with Emily about the vestibules. At this point, the difference to me is, as everyone's pointed out, we've spent a lot of time on this, and I'd like the product to be the best it can within the cost that we can afford.
Start at the 7.7, and then we have to move it back up. Okay.
Yeah.
I said, so started at the 7.7, and if we have to move it back up to 8.
I'm probably comfortable with the 8.
To start?
But we can package it at 7.7. I don't disagree with that.
Trustee Duffy.
I'm fine packaging the 7.7. I probably fall more in line with what Vice President Bartelli just outlined, but I'm comfortable with that approach.
I'm okay with the 7.7. See how that goes.
Yeah.
Then, is there anything else you need, or?
That's what I needed. We needed to make sure we're all on the same page. I know it's tough. I will say this is always the hardest part to get through. It really is. And once you get through here, then it's really kind of allowing the staff and the designers to work together to fine tune plans and things like that. So.
I'm not sure that, Mark. Yeah. So, okay, Trustee Sullivan.
I would prefer to go with the 8, because I think one of the problems that we're going to have is if we don't show some, even if it's just the entrance change, if we don't show at least the entrance bump out, you will not show anything to the community from the exterior. So, and plus, I think that the vestibule would be a good place to have things that like displays, etc. So I would prefer to go with the 8 point. I will defer to everybody else's 7.7, knowing that my preference is to go to the 8.
We added that. So.
Yeah, and I think, after hearing all this, we would definitely package it with an add alt on there to suggest that the design team has to go back and forth. And, we'll see what that does. Well, I'll have a discussion with Director Weinstein on this, this later this week, so we can game plan how we do that.
Penny, are you going to say anything?
I'm going to try to be as constructive as possible. I guess I'll just say, anybody who watches this meeting after it's posted, since the more recent public comments and messages that we've received have been not encouraging the path that we seem to be heading down exactly with the 8 or the 7.7, that, if the people that, are reaching out to individual trustees like Trustee Sullivan and Trustee Duffy and Trustee Swistak, who mentioned that they are getting direct feedback encouraging the need for these things. I'm not getting that directly, and I really would like some of that to make its way to the board, because it's skewing in my mind what the true public desires are at this point. And when we go back to that community survey, it did not support significant additional cost for many things. So, we're at this stage, and I was not unprepared for us to have a significant sized capital project. We do have a significant amount of reserves, and when we started this process, we thought that financially overall this would be easier to achieve without affecting future increases, etc. So I'm asking again for public comment and feedback through email, because I would like to see more support for the direction we seem to be heading, because I'm not comfortable at the moment with the dissonance between the recent feedback, the most recent feedback, and the amount of it versus what we're talking about right now.
Well, and we can talk about, things later, but I think what we should, ultimately, I think we should have people invite them to the library. And I think we had talked about this before, have diagrams of, once we get further along the process, and, invite people to comment.
And on the upside, I should mention, I don't want a nickel and dime. I want whatever project we do, I want it to hit the points of the strategic plan. I don't want it to leave anything off that we'll regret that we didn't do later for one reason or another. I don't want it to negatively affect whether people choose Lisle as a destination. I don't know that the library can make its claim to fame that, like, yes, it's not the Morton Arboretum, it's the library, or it will be the library. But, I want to make sure that what we're doing is in keeping with the values of our town and how proud we are of it, and how great the LLD does already serve the community and hopes to in the future. So I definitely don't want my comments to seem so far out of line with where the rest of you are in spirit. I'm with you in spirit. I'm just not quite with you in dollars and cents and how we get there.
Trustee Sullivan.
No, I was waving goodnight to somebody.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
It's that late.
All right. Good comments by Treasurer Norton. Anything else? Any other comments from the trustees? Anything else, Director Weinstein or Mark?
No, I think unless you think otherwise, I think we have the direction we need.
Ready? If anything else, then can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
This is Secretary Swistak. I move to adjourn.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Sullivan will second.
All right, any comments or questions or discussion? Please.
And Liz Wissett,
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Karen Larson, Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
All right, we are adjourned at 10 o'clock exactly. Thank you, everybody.